Chapter 1870 deliberately made things difficult. Just as Jian Wushuang looked at Luo Xianzi, she looked at Jian Wushuang as well. In her cold eyes, there was a flash of surprise, but it disappeared very quickly. "It's an honor to receive, Sword Emperor. Please forgive me for not traveling far to welcome you," Emperor Sword Sect Master said. Although he wanted Emperor Sword to forgive him, he spoke highly of himself and stayed seated and never stood when he was talking to Jian Wushuang, who was a more powerful figure. It was obvious that he didn't care about Jian Wushuang. "I'm only a junior. How could I make Emperor Sword Sect Master welcome me personally?" Jian Wushuang smiled and wasn't bothered. "Hee, I heard that Sword Emperor is decisive in killing people. Whoever offends you will end miserably. But from what it seems, you aren't behaving as the rumors say. Sword Emperor is quite a friendly person," Emperor Sword Sect Master said with a smile. "Friendly?" Jian Wushuang smiled, but didn't say anything more. "Sword Emperor, I wonder why you came to Emperor Sword Sect today?" Emperor Sword Sect Master finally asked. "Emperor Sword Palace is going to open. I came here, of course, for Emperor Sword Palace's Sword Principal Inheritance Token. This is my Sword Principal Inheritance Token." Jian Wushuang took out his Sword Principal Inheritance Token. The moment the surrounding experts saw the Sword Principal Inheritance Token, they were surprised. Emperor Sword Sect Master saw it, and he creased his eyebrows. He knew that Jian Wushuang had come for Emperor Sword Palace, but he hadn't known that Jian Wushuang had a Sword Principal Inheritance Token. The Sword Principal Inheritance Token was hard to get. Among the almighties there, only Luo Xianzi had a Sword Principal Inheritance Token. Everyone else didn't have one. "Emperor Sword Sect Master, I heard that I can enter Emperor Sword Palace to receive Sword Principal as long as I have Sword Principal Inheritance Token. I wonder if it's true?" Jian Wushuang asked. "Sword Emperor, don't worry." Emperor Sword Sect Master smiled. "Sword Principal Inheritance Token is the only proof to enter Emperor Sword Palace and receive Sword Principal. This is true. However, over the years, Emperor Sword Palace has been opened many times, and the appearance of Sword Principal Inheritance Token is well known to the public. Naturally, there are many people with wicked intentions who forged the Sword Principal Inheritance Token. The outer appearance and the aura are the same as the real one, but in actual fact, it might be an imitation. Emperor Sword Sect Master, what you're saying is that the Sword Principal Inheritance Token in my hand is fake." Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes slightly. The surrounding people gasped a breath of cold air and thought that Emperor Sword Sect Master had the guts to say nonsense. There were genuine and imitated Sword Principal Inheritance Tokens. That was true. However, firstly, forgery of Sword Principal Inheritance Token was very rare. Secondly, even if it was really forgery, it would at most be circulated in eternal chaotic world and be sold to people who didn't know what it was at a high price. In other words, people who had more money than sense, who would come to Emperor Sword Sect with a forged Sword Principal Inheritance Token. Everyone knew that Emperor Sword Sect could differentiate true or false Sword Principal Inheritance Tokens. Under such circumstances, weren't those who brought forged tokens asking to be snubbed? Besides, if it was a universe god or real god who took out Sword Principal Inheritance Token, it might be a forged one. However, the one who had taken out the Sword Principal Inheritance Token was Jian Wushuang. How could Sword Emperor take out a forged item? It was impossible, but Emperor Sword Sect Master had said so. It was obvious that he wanted to deliberately make it difficult for Jian Wushuang. Emperor Sword Sect Master chuckled when he noticed Jian Wushuang's change of expression. "Sword Emperor, don't misunderstand me. I didn't say that the sword principal inheritance token that you brought is fake, but Emperor Sword Palace only opens once every 1 million years, and there is a limited quota. It's best to be more careful. You're right. Jian Wushuang looked calm. No one could guess his feelings. If so, Emperor Sword Sect Master shall determine the authenticity of the sword principal inheritance token personally. Then Jian Wushuang threw the sword principal inheritance token in his hand to Emperor Sword Sect Master. Emperor Sword Sect Master caught it and spread his palm. He didn't need to probe, as he already knew that the sword principal inheritance token was real. He had done it with the intention to make it difficult for Jian Wushuang, but he didn't expect Jian Wushuang to give him the sword principal inheritance token directly. Wouldn't Jian Wushuang be worried that he would pull some tricks on sword principal inheritance token, so it would become fake? Sword Emperor's sword principal inheritance token is true. Emperor Sword Sect Master chuckled, and he passed sword principal inheritance token back to Jian Wushuang. As you have checked the authenticity of the token, can I enter Sword Emperor Palace now? Jian Wushuang asked coldly. Yes, of course. But Sword Emperor should know that Emperor Sword Palace is controlled by Emperor Sword Sect as well. Among the 5 sword principal inheritance tokens, there are 3 tokens that Emperor Sword Sect took the initiative to distribute, including the one in Sword Emperor's hand. Since Emperor Sword Sect has offered such a great opportunity, we of course expect things in return. Emperor Sword Sect Master squinted his eyes and smiled at Jian Wushuang. Of course, I know that. I wonder what is the price that Emperor Sword Sect Master would like me to pay. Jian Wushuang looked calm. There was no free lunch in the world. Jian Wushuang knew that concept really well. Emperor Sword Sect controlled Emperor Sword Palace, and they took the initiative to send out sword principal inheritance token. Their purpose of doing so was to receive sufficient benefits. The experts who had visited Emperor Sword Sect, even those who didn't have sword principal inheritance tokens but could receive meager sword principals, had to pay a price too. Emperor Sword Sect isn't asking for much. To Sword Emperor, it is nothing. 3 attack divine weapons and 1 defense armor. Emperor Sword Sect Master smiled. That's simple. Jian Wushuang lifted his head to look at Emperor Sword Sect Master. He flipped his hand and took out 3 real god limited chaotic unique treasure level divine weapons and a real god limited chaotic unique treasure level defense armor. I wonder if Emperor Sword Sect Master is happy with these items. Jian Wushuang asked. Real god limited chaotic unique treasure was valuable too. The total of 4 treasures should be worth more than 30,000 doctrine gems. It was already considered a costly price. However, Emperor Sword Sect Master looked at the 3 divine weapons and set of armor in disdain and said, I think Sword Emperor misunderstood me. The divine weapon and armor that I mentioned aren't unique treasures, but chaotic divine treasures. What? Everyone in the hall was shocked. Jian Wushuang's eyes dilated in shock when he heard what Emperor Sword Sect Master said. Chapter 1871 Fall. Oh, Chaos Divine Treasure? The Emperor Sword Sect Master had demanded 3 divine weapons and 1 defense armor. However, all of them had to be Chaos Divine Treasures? Upon hearing that, the first thought that the large number of experts present had was that the Emperor Sword Sect Master was crazy. They were Chaos Divine Treasures. Even the most normal attack-type divine weapons were enough to cause many Emperor gods to cast their covetous eyes on it or even go crazy for it. After all, most of the weaker Emperor gods did not possess a single Chaos Divine Treasure, and one such example was Emperor God Xianwu, let alone a defense armor which was more valuable than attack-type divine weapons. It was just to enter the Emperor's Sword Palace, and Jian Wushuang possessed the sword principal inheritance token. Under such circumstances, the Emperor's Sword Sect master still demanded such an unbelievable price from him. He was indeed crazy. However, upon thinking about the words that the Emperor's Sword Sect master had just said, in that it was possible for the sword principal inheritance token that Jian Wushuang had taken out to be an imitation, everyone present understood. All of them knew that the Emperor's Sword Sect master was making things difficult for Jian Wushuang on purpose. As for the 3 Chaos Divine Treasure level attack type weapons and 1 defense armor, it was said by him randomly, and even he himself knew that it was impossible. Emperor's Sword Sect Master, I am probably not the only one who has come here with the sword principal inheritance token. I wonder what is the price that the rest of them paid. Jian Wushuang questioned indifferently. Apart from you, Luo Xianzi came with a sword principal inheritance token. As for the price that she paid, its worth was naturally not less than yours, the Emperor's Sword Sect Master laughed. Is that so? Jian Wushuang could not help but glance at Luo Xianzi. However, it was a pity that Luo Xianzi still looked ice-cold, and she did not say anything. Looks like this trip of mine was wasted. Jian Wushuang laughed apathetically. Sword Emperor, since you are unable to pay the price, I'm sorry, but you have to leave. Oh, right, before you leave, you have to leave the sword principal inheritance token behind. It just so happens that this time around, my Emperor's Sword Sect has a new genius real god. Hence, it will be appropriate to give him this sword principal inheritance token, Emperor's Sword Sect Master said dully, and his words were filled with ridicule. What a pity, Jian Wushuang sighed lightly, and he seemed to be unable to do anything. However, all of a sudden, Jian Wushuang raised his head again, and he wore a joking smile. Emperor's Sword Sect Master, let's change the conditions. Change the conditions? How will we change it? The Emperor's Sword Sect Master looked over. Let's forget about the 3 Chaos Divine Treasure level attack type, divine weapons, and defense armor. Instead, let me use the lives of the large number of disciples and experts of your Emperor's Sword Sect in exchange for my right to enter the Emperor's Sword Sect. What do you think? Jian Wushuang said randomly. As soon as his words left his mouth, the whole palace froze instantly. The large number of experts in the palace opened their eyes wide, and they had shocked expressions. Using the lives of the large number of disciples and experts of the Emperor's Sword Sect to exchange for his right to enter, the meaning behind Jian Wushuang's words, Sword Emperor, may I know what you were trying to say? The Emperor's Sword Sect Master's expression turned cold and gloomy. What I am trying to say, could it be that the Emperor's Sword Sect Master really does not understand? Jian Wushuang laughed. Before I came, I heard that there was an episode between you and my palace master in the past. Hence, I had already expected you to make things difficult for me on purpose. Originally, I planned to allow you to make things difficult for me. After all, your Emperor's Sword Sect is the one who is in control of Emperor's Sword Palace. As long as you do not overdo it on the account of Sword Emperor Dugu, it will be all right even if I were to suffer losses. However, it's a pity that you are too stupid. You are too arrogant. Jian Wushuang's voice resounded within the palace slowly, and the hearts of the large number of experts from the Emperor's Sword Sect twitched. They had a bad feeling. At the next moment, what they expected really happened. All of a sudden, frightening god power burst forth from Jian Wushuang's body, and it was accompanied by an extremely powerful sword essence, which wanted to tear the vault of heaven apart. The god power covered the Emperor's Sword Sect instantly. Under the god power and sword essence, it was still all right for those almighties in the palace. However, as for some of the real gods of the Emperor's Sword Sect who stayed in the palace, as well as the large number of disciples of the Emperor's Sword Sect who were outside the palace, most of them knelt down instantly. As for those people who were close to Jian Wushuang, blood flowed out of their ears, noses, and mouths. Such a scene caused the Emperor's Sword Sect master expression to change greatly. Jian Wushuang, please stop this. With a loud cry, an extremely powerful aura rose from the Emperor's Sword Sect master's body. Two frightening auras then clashed head-on in the palace. Boom. Under the attack of the two auras, the whole palace was smashed into pieces at once. The large number of experts inside the palace rose in succession. A large number of experts appeared at the void, and at the same time, swoosh, 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 swoosh. A few figures flew over in succession from the surrounding. They were some of the almighties of the Emperor's Sword Sect. Although the Emperor's Sword Sect was not as powerful as the Abysmal Palace and Soaring Heaven King Palace, it was extremely old and it had a great foundation. On top of that, they were in control of the Emperor's Sword Palace, a place that was rich in resources. Furthermore, they had a large number of experts. They had a total of 7 almighties. However, among them, the Emperor's Sword Sect Master was the only Emperor God. Just then, the 7 almighties, which included Emperor's Sword Sect Master, were standing together, and they were looking at Jian Wushuang with anger. As for the experts who had come for the Emperor's Sword Palace, all of them stood to the side, and it was obvious that they did not want to be involved. Jian Wushuang, what are you trying to do? The Emperor's Sword Sect Master's face was filled with fury. Jian Wushuang's suppression with his divine power previously had merely caused the consciousness of the disciples inside the Emperor's Sword Sect to take some damage, and no one had any serious injuries. However, Jian Wushuang's actions were the same as hitting the face of the Emperor's Sword Sect. What am I trying to do? Could it be that the Emperor's Sword Sect Master has not guessed yet? Jian Wushuang sneered. I have already said that this sect master of yours is too stupid. In actual fact, the moment I came to your Emperor's Sword Sect, you should have treated me with respect. Not to mention making things difficult for me. If it were a sect master who was more sensible, he would probably be extremely modest, and he would not get me to pay any price to enter the Emperor's Sword Palace. Moreover, he might even think of ways to make friends with me, as he is certain of one thing, not to mention the fact that I possessed the sword principal inheritance token. Even if I did not have it with my abilities, I would still be able to enter the Emperor's Sword Palace easily without much effort. But you, No wonder even though the Emperor's Sword Sect possessed the Emperor's Sword Palace, which is rich in resources, it is still unable to come up on top in terms of ranking among the large number of big powerhouses in the Sanctuary Alliance. Jian Wushuang sneered, and this caused Emperor's Sword Sect Master to have an even uglier expression. How impudent! Jian Wushuang, don't forget that you are now in my Emperor's Sword Sect, and you are not in your lineage of Star, the Emperor's Sword Sect Master said with flames of fury. Is that so? Jian Wushuang shook his head and laughed. You still do not understand. Be it the lineage of Star or the Emperor's Sword Sect, to me, aren't both of them the same? As soon as his words left his mouth, Jian Wushuang's body moved. In the Emperor's Sword Sect, the base of the Emperor's Sword Sect, Jian Wushuang commenced his attack. Chapter 1872, One Person Suppressing One Sect, Part 1. A fierce blowing sound was heard, and the void instantly exploded. The moment they saw Jian Wushuang take action, Emperor's Sword Sect, a total of 7 almighties including Emperor's Sword Sect Master, looked shocked. Although they were 7 almighties, they were dealing with a true decision then. Reincarnation Palm. Jian Wushuang's billowing divine power concentrated in collaboration with the power of ancient tribe bloodline under the cover of reincarnation power. Virum, a huge palm that seemed to contain the entire reincarnation doctrine, swept out. The moment the palm was pushed out, the universe changed its color. The palm engulfed the 7 people, including Emperor Sword Sect Master. Jian Wushuang was obviously going to fight the 7 alone. "You have guts!" Emperor Sword Sect Master immediately roared. As his voice reverberated in the sky, a boundless sword intention soared up from his body. Although Emperor Sword Sect Master was stupid, he was quite powerful. He was a true peak emperor god, after all. Then, there was a spear with a green luster that gave out faint gold lightning in his hands. His might instantly increased. "Break!" As Emperor Sword Sect Master spat one word. The spear instantly brought about boundless golden lightning and stabbed. It pierced the reincarnation palm. Walala! Boundless divine power dispersed to the surrounding, and Emperor Sword Sect Master's figure shuttled through the reincarnation palm. His gaze was cold as he glared at Jian Wushuang. Sword formation! The 6 almighties from Emperor Sword Sect quickly exploded their soaring sword intentions when they heard Emperor Sword Sect Master's command. The 6 almighties' sword intentions resonated and instantly formed a huge sword formation. Emperor Sword Sect focused on swords, and their sword formation was extremely famous too. Then, what the 6 almighties had performed was 6 sword formation. It was the strongest sword formation that combined both attacks and defense as one. The sword formation performed by 6 Sir Gods altogether was even more powerful. Die! The moment the sword formation took place, the 6 almighties glared coldly and suddenly drove the formation at Jian Wushuang. Similarly, 6 sword formation attacked too. Jian Wushuang looked at everything in front of him calmly. On the finger on his right hand, there was billowing divine power gathering. Ancient God's 7th finger, vault of heaven's finger. A terrifying space-time whirlpool that covered hundreds of thousands of miles appeared in the air. The whirlpool strangled everything in the universe to death. For instance, the palaces in Emperor Sword Sect shattered into pieces. Luckily, the real gods and universe gods from Emperor Sword Sect retreated to a faraway place so that they weren't affected. Otherwise, the space-time whirlpool itself would be sufficient to turn Emperor Sword Sect into bloodbath. Then, there was a huge finger in a black jade color that extended from the whirlpool. The huge finger was boundless, and it pointed to the void in front with terrifying power. 6 sword matches, life-destroying sword out. Among the 6 almighties from Emperor Sword Sect, one of them shouted, and the 6 terrifying sword intentions merged. Rumble! A huge sword that gave out a boundless gleam substantiated, and the huge sword swung down under the trigger of the formation. Bang! Both collided, and the void suddenly became quiet. In a short while, both the huge black and jade-colored finger and the huge sword that gave out a boundless gleam collapsed. Oh! Jian Wushuang looked shocked. He utilized his divine power and ancient tribe bloodline to perform Ancient God's 7th finger, Vault of Heaven's finger. In the end, the 6 almighties had withstood it with their sword formation. That's interesting. Jian Wushuang smiled. Die! A sharp sword intention that seemed to be able to tear everything suddenly exploded from Jian Wushuang. Emperor Sword Sect Master appeared next to Jian Wushuang and wielded his spear with faint lightning. Sword light attacked and brought about the surrounding space-time, and sword intention that signified that it stops at nothing until it killed its enemy. Jian Wushuang squinted his eyes. Blood Mountain Sword was drawn from the scabbard and wielded his sword. Dang! There was a low clashing noise. Emperor Sword Sect Master was a peak emperor god, after all. Although his ranking wasn't as high as Fortress Master Hong Tian's on the Heaven and Earth Supreme ranking list, who had died, he wasn't weak. Jian Wushuang was in a hurry to withstand the sudden stroke, and he inevitably took a few steps back. Emperor Sword Sect Master saw that. and he gained confidence. Jian Wushuang, you're courting death yourself. You dare to attack an Emperor's Sword Sect. Even if I kill you here today, there is definitely no one who will comment much. Kill me here? Emperor Sword Sect Master, you have some guts. Jian Wushuang couldn't help but sneer. The surrounding almighties who were watching the fight turned up their noises at what Emperor Sword Sect Master had said. Jian Wushuang was on the 22nd place on Heaven and Earth's supreme ranking list. As such a superb existence, only great emperors or the top among emperor gods, underworld gods, would be confident in winning against Jian Wushuang. Emperor Sword Sect Master was merely at the bottom of all peak emperor gods, but he wanted to kill Jian Wushuang. Even if he was an Emperor Sword Sect, and he had the assistance of the other 6 almighties, they could at most fight evenly with Jian Wushuang. Kill Jian Wushuang. The people at the scene wanted to ask Emperor Sword Sect Master where his courage came from. Emperor Sword Sect is pitiful to have you as their sect master. Jian Wushuang sneered, and there was faint, chilly gleam in his eyes. Virum! 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 3 golden lights suddenly soared up. The 3 golden lights were glorious like 3 golden suns. They were Jian Wushuang's Hongjun golden swords. Golden swords? It's Sword Emperor's famous golden swords. The moment the golden swords are out, it means that Sword Emperor is going all out. The surrounding experts who were watching gasped as they held their breath and watched. Jian Wushuang didn't speak anymore, but the 3 Hongjun golden swords quivered and instantly shot out. The 3 golden lights flashed past like fish in a pond. The 3 golden lights bypassed Emperor Sword Sect Master and instantly appeared in front of the 6 almighties. The 6 almighties immediately responded. Be careful! Activate the formation to block the 3 golden swords. Virum! A fierce sword intention exploded, and the 6 almighties followed his command. Jian Wushuang saw and smiled in disdain. Did it work? Dang! 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 3 continuous thuds, and the 3 Hongyun golden swords backed off and instantly plunged out again. The second attack. Chapter 1873, One Person Suppressing One Sect Part 2, Clang, clang. This time around, 2 clashing sounds could be heard. As for the remaining golden sword, it struck the chest of one of the almighties without any hindrance. Although this almighty's defense was not weak, while facing the attack by the golden sword, he still spit out a mouthful of blood. His aura decreased instantly, and his body was sent flying like a cannonball. Although he did not die straight away, he no longer had any fighting capabilities. As for the 6 sword formation, with the loss of one almighty, the whole sword formation fell apart. Jian Wushuang's 3 Hongjun golden swords then attacked in succession. As the Sur gods faced the Hongjun golden swords alone, they absolutely did not have the ability to block them. Puff, 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 puff. 5 sounds of a person spitting blood could be heard at the same time. In just 2 face-offs, all the 6 almighties had been seriously injured. Not good. Upon seeing that, the Emperor Sword Sect Master's expression changed greatly. However, the speed of the Hongjun golden swords was too fast, and he had no way to stop them. Hence, he could only look on as the Hongjun golden swords dealt fatal blows to the 6 almighties. Humph, the power and defense of the 6-sword formation is indeed not too bad. However, it's a pity that this sword formation required the 6 of them to activate it at the same time. Moreover, when activating it, the divine power and sword essence of the 6 of them needed to resonate with one another. Although this process would only take an instant, this instant was a weak point to my Hongjun golden swords, Jian Wushuang sneered. The most frightening thing about the Hongjun golden swords was their speed. He was controlling 3 Hongjun golden swords to attack at the same time. during the first attack, the six Almighties were still able to react in time and activate the Great Formation to block it. However, after blocking the attack, the Hongjun Golden Swords could continue to launch a second attack in close proximity, and there would not be any breaks in between the attacks. Since the six Almighties of the Emperor's Sword Sect had just activated the sword formation to block the first attack, they would need to activate the formation at the same time again if they wanted to block the attack a second time. In terms of speed, this was naturally a lot slower. Hence, this had allowed the Hongjun Golden Swords to find an opportunity to destroy the sword formation, and in no time, they dealt serious blows to the six Almighties. Moreover, the Emperor's Sword Sect Master was unable to react in time. Furthermore, if Jian Wushuang wanted to, he could absolutely kill all the six Almighties at that instant. Emperor's Sword Sect Master, it's your turn now. Jian Wushuang had a cold expression. After dealing serious blows to the six Almighties, his eyes looked in the direction of the Emperor's Sword Sect Master. Buzz, buzz, buzz. The three Hongjun Golden Swords shook slightly and were shot out instantly upon seeing the three brilliant rays of golden light which had appeared in front of him. The Emperor's Sword Sect Master revealed a furious expression. He then unleashed his sword principles in succession while roaring with the intention to stop the three Hongjun Golden Swords. However, he did not notice that the experts who were observing the battle by the side had already revealed sympathetic expressions. What a joke! Jian Wushuang's Hongjun Golden Swords were famous for being frightening. Even though he had only used 3 of them, they were still extremely powerful. Back then, when Palace Master Wu Luo, who was ranked 25 in the Heaven and Earth Supreme ranking list, had faced the 3 Hongyun Golden Swords that Jian Wushuang controlled with his full power, he had only managed to block them with a lot of difficulty. The moment Jian Wushuang had activated the 4th one, he was completely defeated. Comparing both the Emperor's Sword Sect Master and Palace Master Wu Luo, they were at completely different levels. As expected, the 3 Hongjun Golden Swords merely attacked a few times, and its great amount of power sent the sword that the Emperor's Sword Sect Master was holding in his hands flying right away. Although the Emperor's Sword Sect Master had done his best, to the point where it could be said that he had used all his tricks other than soul burn, he was still completely defeated by the 3 Hongjun Golden Swords. Bam, bam, bam. The 3 Hongjun Golden Swords struck the Emperor's Sword Sect Master's body in succession. As the Emperor's Sword Sect had a great foundation, the Emperor's Sword Sect Master possessed a Chaos Divine treasure-level defense armor. However, after being struck by the 3 Hongjun Golden Swords head-on, he still could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood, and his expression turned pale. Jian Wushuang waved his hands lightly, and the 3 Hongjun Golden Swords did not continue their attacks. Instead, they returned to Jian Wushuang's front. Such a scene had caused the large number of experts who were observing the battle by the side to become silent. In their hearts, they were sighing lightly. As expected of the Sword Emperor, he is too powerful. This time around, in just a short amount of time, a lineup that was formed by the Emperor's Sword Sect Master, as well as the 6 Almighties of the Emperor's Sword Sect, were defeated instantly. How powerful! The Sword Emperor has only used 3 golden swords. All of them could not help but gasp. With him alone, he had defeated the large number of Almighties in the Emperor's Sword Sect and given them serious injuries. Moreover, they could tell that Jian Wushuang had shown them mercy. If not, these Almighties would definitely not get off so lightly with serious injuries. One person suppressing one sect. This is a typical example of one person suppressing one sect. A Sir God, who was observing the battle, could not help but murmur. One person suppressing one sect. The other people gasped in admiration. In the eternal chaotic world, abilities represented respect. As long as one was powerful enough, situations where one person suppressed the whole sect of the other party could be found everywhere. However, just then, Jian Wushuang had used his own power to suppress the Emperor's Sword Sect, a big powerhouse in the Sanctuary Alliance. The Emperor's Sword Sect, which was old and had a great foundation, had actually been suppressed by Jian Wushuang alone. Emperor Sword Sect Master, are you happy now? Jian Wushuang's expression was cold, and he was looking down at the Emperor's Sword Sect Master, whose expression was ghastly pale. Happy? Ha ha. Jian Wushuang, do you think that by relying on your own powerful abilities, you will be able to do what you want? Don't forget that my Emperor Sword Sect is a member of the Sanctuary Alliance. During the long years, my Emperor Sword Sect has contributed greatly to the Sanctuary Alliance. Moreover, on the outside, many people owed my Emperor Sword Sect favors. For example, there are no less than 3 Emperor gods who are good friends with my Emperor Sword Sect. If you were to be reckless, the Sanctuary Alliance would definitely not let you off. As for those almighties who are good friends with my Emperor Sword Sect, they would definitely not let you off either. Emperor Sword Sect Master shouted with a heavy voice. Upon hearing that, the experts who were observing the battle by the side opened their eyes wide, eyes that were filled with astonishment, then looked in the direction of the Emperor Sword Sect Master. They were not shocked with regards to the contributions and favors that the Emperor Sword Sect Master had mentioned. As the Emperor Sword Sect was old with a great foundation, they would have definitely contributed greatly to the Sanctuary Alliance and made friends with quite a number of experts. As such, they were not surprised. What they were really astonished about was the Emperor Sword Sect Master's stupidity. Was he not aware of the situation that was in front of him, or did he have no idea who he was facing? It was the Sword Emperor, who was known for his fierce name. A genuine, murderous god, a malignant star. He really thought that this murderous god would not dare to go on a killing spree? As expected, after the Emperor Sword Sect Master had finished talking, Jian Wushuang's eyes turned completely ice-cold. In the next moment, his body moved, as if it were teleportation. Jian Wushuang appeared in front of one of the Sir Gods of the Emperor Sword Sect. Moreover, he had already extended one of his big hands like tongs. This Sir God's expression then changed greatly. However, as the gap between their abilities was too huge, and he had already been seriously injured by Jian Wushuang's Hongjun golden swords, which had caused him to not have much fighting capabilities left, he had no way of fighting back. Chapter 1874 Drowning Disaster. Wow! Jian Wushuang's hand grabbed the Sir God's neck as though he was lifting up a chick. He moved and returned to his original position. In the void, Jian Wushuang's face was cold. He held the Sir God and humphed coldly. Before Emperor Sword Sect Master's gaze, Jian Wushuang exerted strength in his grip. Bang! The Sir God's head exploded from Jian Wushuang's grip. The Sir God expert instantly died. What? The remaining few Sir Gods from Emperor Sword Sect came back to reality, and they were in shock. Emperor Sword Sect Master instantly became furious. Jian Wushuang, how dare you, idiot! Jian Wushuang roared and cut off Emperor Sword Sect Master. He was then soaring with murderous intention, and his gaze was extremely cold. Emperor Sword Sect Master, if you say anything more, I will slaughter the entire Emperor Sword Sect. Emperor Sword Sect Master quivered. The 5 remaining Sir Gods from Emperor Sword Sect had their eyes wide open. The surrounding experts, who were watching the fight, looked at Sword Emperor Sect Master in ridicule. They knew that Jian Wushuang was not a person that one should offend, but Emperor Sword Sect Master wanted to believe in himself infallibly instead. It was true that Emperor Sword Sect had contributed greatly to Sanctuary Alliance, and they were friends with many experts in Sanctuary Alliance. However, These things were merely things on the outside. What was the most important thing in this world? It wasn't assistance from the outside, but one's power. One's power was the true foundation. Jian Wushuang had believed in that all his life. So, what if Emperor Sword Sect were friends with experts? If Jian Wushuang were to slaughter everyone in Emperor Sword Sect and destroy the sect, how much would the friendship cost? Among the almighties that were his friends, how many of them are willing to take revenge on Jian Wushuang for Emperor Sword Sect that had been destroyed? There should be very few. Even if there were, what could they do to Jian Wushuang? Jian Wushuang's eyes were glowing. If it was any other period of time, and Emperor Sword Sect had made it difficult for him over and over again, Jian Wushuang would have started a massacre and kill everyone in Emperor Sword Sect. It was unnecessary trouble. Then, Lineage of Star was at the heart of the struggle. Emperor Sword Sect was a major force, their foundation was solid, and they were associated with many. Hence, unless it was necessary, Jian Wushuang wasn't willing to tear it apart. Even if he was forced to attack, he wouldn't exactly attack with full force. Otherwise, during the fight earlier, how many of the almighties from Emperor Sword Sect would still be alive? He believed that he had tolerated enough. He had never expected Emperor Sword Sect Master to push to the current situation. After all, Lineage of Star is eyed by all forces. Emperor Sword Sect is just one extra. Jian Wushuang had already made a decision then. If Emperor Sword Sect Master were to say another word, he would instantly attack and kill all experts from Emperor Sword Sect in prevention of future trouble. The experts from Emperor Sword Sect could feel Jian Wushuang's billowing murderous intention and his determination. They knew that Jian Wushuang wasn't joking. He had guts, and he definitely had the capability to destroy Emperor Sword Sect on the spot. Emperor Sword Sect Master was dumbfounded. Because he had had a conflict with the Master of Star Palace before, he was upset, and he wanted to deliberately make it difficult for Jian Wushuang. He had never thought to have a fight with Jian Wushuang. After all, he had heard of Jian Wushuang's power and bad name. However, he had never expected that Jian Wushuang would come to Emperor Sword Palace and would behave so humbly and courteously with him, to the point where he had thought Jian Wushuang wasn't as scary as rumors said. Hence, he had made it more and more difficult for Jian Wushuang. In the end, he had even had the thought of not letting Jian Wushuang enter Emperor Sword Palace and forcing him to leave. But he had never expected this outcome. In other words, because of his thoughts, a Sir God from Emperor Sword Sect had died, and the entire Emperor Sword Sect was on the brink of death. His one sentence or one action could possibly bring Emperor Sword Sect to a drowning disaster. Then he only had two options. Either he continued to behave stubbornly and watch Emperor Sword Sect be destroyed by Jian Wushuang. After that Sanctuary Alliance, and those experts who were friends with Emperor Sword Sect would definitely take revenge for Emperor Sword Sect, but he and the experts from Emperor Sword Sect would definitely be dead. Or he would lower his head and yield to Jian Wushuang. Emperor Sword Sect Master muttered as he struggled in his head. However, as he struggled in his head, there was a figure that walked out of the crowd of experts who were watching the fight. The moment the person walked out, she immediately caught everyone's attention. Luo Xianzi. It's Luo Xianzi. She walked out from the crowd. Is she going to help Emperor Sword Sect? Very possibly. Emperor Sword Sect promised to let Luo Xianzi enter Emperor Sword Palace. It is considered a favor to Luo Xianzi. She won't watch as Jian Wushuang presses Emperor Sword Sect into a corner. The surrounding experts discussed among themselves. The people from Emperor Sword Sect became excited. They were looking at Luo Xianzi as their final life-saving straw. As for Jian Wushuang, he squinted his eyes when he saw Luo Xianzi walked out. He said, "Luo Xianzi, are you trying to get involved?" "Today, Emperor Sword Sect did make it difficult for you at first, but Sword Emperor has already killed a Sir God from Emperor Sword Sect. It is already a heavy lesson to Emperor Sword Sect. It should be enough. Hence, I'd like to be a mediator. I hope both parties can just stop here. What do you think? Want me to stop?" Jian Wushuang smiled faintly. "I can, but Emperor Sword Sect must apologize to me, and they must give me 1,000,000 doctrine gems as a gift of apology. Then, I'll let this slip." What Jian Wushuang said stirred a commotion at the scene. The few people from Emperor Sword Sect, including Emperor Sword Sect Master, looked embarrassed. To apologize to Jian Wushuang, although they had made it difficult first, Jian Wushuang had already killed their Sir Gods and injured them. They had already suffered a great loss. Then they had to apologize, and also the gift of 1,000,000 doctrine gems. 1,000,000 doctrine gems. It was all a Sir God was worth. "Why are you unwilling to?" Jian Wushuang continued to look cold. "Sword Emperor." Luo Xianzi spoke again. "Why don't we make a bet?" "Make a bet?" Jian Wushuang looked at Luo Xianzi. "How?" "You and I are listed on Heaven and Earth's Supreme Ranking list. One at the 21st place, and one at the 22nd place. We are close in ranking, and we are both good with swords. As we have met today, why don't we have a battle?" Luo Xianzi smiled. Chapter 1875. Luo Xianzi. Luo Xianzi's words had caused everyone present to be stunned. Have a duel. One of them was ranked 21, while the other was ranked 22. These two experts wanted to have a duel. Could it be that this was really for the sake of the Emperor Sword Sect? "Sword Emperor, how about this? Let's have a duel with each other. If you win, the Emperor Sword Sect will apologize to you and give you the necessary compensation. I will not interfere anymore. However, if I win, I can still guarantee you that the Emperor Sword Sect will stop making things different for you. However, you must forget about the apology and compensation," Luo Xianzi said. "All right," Jian Wushuang agreed, without thinking. "I heard your name a long time ago. Hence, I wish to see how strong you are." "Please go ahead then." As Luo Xianzi spoke, a purple soft sword appeared in her hands. Similarly, Luo Xianzi was an expert who was proficient in sword principles. Upon seeing Luo Xianzi's actions, the large number of experts who were observing the battle became excited. Although Jian Wushuang had fought moments ago, his opponent was merely the Emperor Sword Sect. Although the Emperor Sword Sect had 7 almighties, which was inclusive of the Emperor Sword Sect Master, who was a peak Emperor God, there was no room for them to struggle when they faced Jian Wushuang. However, it was completely different for Luo Xianzi. Comparing rankings, Luo Xianzi had a higher rank than Jian Wushuang. For the great battle between these two people, it would no doubt be unusually brilliant. "Luo Xianzi, please be careful." Jian Wushuang laughed nonchalantly. At the same time as his words left his mouth, the 3 Hongjun golden swords, which were floating in front of him, shot out instantly. 3 brilliant rays of golden light then appeared in front of Luo Xianzi instantly. Luo Xianzi merely glanced at the 3 rays of golden light, and she swung the sword in her hands randomly. A purple light, which looked like a shooting star, then appeared in front of the 3 Hongjun golden swords. Clang, clang, clang. The 3 Hongjun golden swords, which had defeated the Emperor Sword Sect Master, were sent flying at that moment. Although the 3 Hongjun golden swords shook slightly and attacked again, Luo Xianzi merely swung her swords like before and stopped the 3 Hongjun golden swords easily. Be it power or speed, Luo Xianzi's sword principles were not weaker than the Hongjun golden swords in the slightest bit. Sword Emperor, when you defeated Palace Master Wu Luo back then, didn't you use 4 golden swords at the same time? Why are there only 3 now? Luo Xianzi laughed as she fought with the 3 golden swords. It was obvious that she was holding her ground without much effort. As you wish. Jian Wushuang did not hesitate. With a thought, the 4th Hongjun golden sword was shot out right away. With the 4 of them attacking at the same time, their frightening speed was completely unleashed, and the pressure on Luo Xianzi increased greatly at once. However, all of a sudden, Luo Xianzi's body turned vague, and a figure that was exactly the same as her appeared by her side. Similarly, this figure held a sword, and her sword principles were extremely powerful. However, in terms of power, she was slightly weaker than her real body. This is Luo Xianzi's illusory god clone. Jian Wushuang's heart twitched. Jian Wushuang had some information regarding Luo Xianzi, and he knew that she had an illusory god clone. This illusory god clone had been created by Luo Xianzi in the past when she had obtained a special secret skill that was left behind from the ancient past while traveling in the ancient mystery land. For this secret skill, one must first pay a huge price to create an illusory god. After that, he would need to use a special way to insert his own blood into the illusory god, so that his consciousness would have perfect control of the illusory god. When he was about to fight an intense battle, he could split a small portion of his consciousness to control the illusory god, allowing the illusory god to unleash secret skills and attack moves that were similar to his own. Hence, it was the same as having 2 of himself. For example, Jian Wushuang possessed many Dao soldiers. Although these Dao soldiers possessed power similar to that of Almighties, they were unable to unleash attack-type secret skills and other techniques. As such, their fighting capabilities were greatly decreased. As for Luo Xianzi's illusory god clone, it could allow the illusory god to unleash the same sword principles as the main body. This secret skill was very impressive. Back then, quite a number of experts had cast their covetous eyes on it. However, after Luo Xianzi made the training method of the secret skill public, all those people lost interest at once. Because in the eternal chaotic world then, there was no way to create new illusory gods. Back then, Luo Xianzi had been lucky. At the same time that she obtained the secret skill, she obtained an illusory god. As such, she had an illusory god clone. The moment the illusory god clone appeared, she unleashed the same powerful sword principles. Combined with Luo Xianzi's real body, they were able to stop the 4 Hongjun golden swords easily. Moreover, at the same time that they stopped the Hongjun golden swords, Luo Xianzi and her illusory god clone approached Jian Wushuang continuously. Looks like the Hongjun golden swords alone are unable to do anything against Luo Xianzi. Jian Wushuang laughed, and he was not surprised. Buzz. A powerful bloodline aura burst forth from Jian Wushuang's body. All of a sudden, Jian Wushuang's body expanded, and his skin changed to black jade instantly. Heads and arms appeared from his stalwart body. A total of 7 heads and 14 arms. Each brawny arm was holding onto a sword tightly. At the next moment, Jian Wushuang moved his body fiercely. Die! The swords in Jian Wushuang's hands, which were accompanied with fury and power, were swung out fiercely toward Luo Xianzi, who was in front of him. Luo Xianzi was filled with murderous intent. In an instant, the sword in her hands changed into an endless stream of waves and attacked. The sword that Jian Wushuang swung had struck Luo Xianzi's soft sword. However, the feeling that it gave him was as though he had struck a pile of cotton, and he did not have a feeling that his force had landed. What a strange sword principle! Jian Wushuang's heart twitched. After that, his eyes glowed with a shrill light. He then swung his 14 swords madly. As for the 4 Hongjun golden swords, They were not affected in the slightest, and they continued to head toward Luo Xianzi crazily. It was a perfect combination of his close quarter combat abilities and his 4 Hongjun golden swords. Jian Wushuang's abilities were completely unleashed. While he is controlling those 4 Hongjun golden swords with his full power, he can engage in a close-quarters battle with me at the same time. Luo Xianzi's expression changed. The 2 battles that had made Jian Wushuang famous. One of them was the battle in the Deluge Fortress, while the other one was the battle with Palace Master Wu Luo. During those 2 battles, Jian Wushuang had used the Hongjun golden swords. However, when he was controlling the Hongjun golden swords to attack, his body stayed at the void by the side. This had created an illusion for many people and caused them to think that it was not easy for Jian Wushuang to control the golden swords. As such, he had to control it with his full power, and he could not divert his attention to close-quarters combat. However, then, while Jian Wushuang was engaged in a close-quarters battle with her, the 4 Hongjun golden swords still continued to attack continuously. It was obvious that these 2 attack moves could happen at the same time. In actual fact, Jian Wushuang's Hongjun golden swords had always been controlled by his soul power, and it was totally unrelated to his close-quarters combat. Similarly, it was extremely easy for him to activate his soul power even when he was engaged in a close-quarters battle. As such, he was not affected at all. Chapter 1876. Emperor Sword Palace opened. Jian Wushuang and Luo Xianzi fought closely. The 4 Hongjun golden swords attacked continuously, and Luo Xianzi had to fight with her all. The surrounding people who were watching the fight looked horrified. Sword Emperor's close body combat is so terrifying. I heard long ago that he had ancient god bloodline. An ancient god is a unique tribe that is #1 in close body combat. Most importantly, when he was fighting at close quarters, he still could use the 4 golden swords. The golden sword's speed and power aren't affected at all. He is so scary. Merely with the attack of the 4 golden swords, he once defeated Palace Master Wu Luo. Now he displays his fierce body combat skill. My goodness! The experts exclaimed. Of course, Jian Wushuang revealed fierce fighting power, and Luo Xianzi wasn't too shabby herself. Her swordsmanship was too powerful, too impressive. Jian Wushuang was good with swords. In terms of swordsmanship, he was slightly behind Luo Xianzi. Luo Xianzi's sword's movement was unpredictable, like an ocean, like a boiling volcano, like lofty overlapping mountains. In addition to the assistance of her clone, she didn't have the lower hand even when she was dealing with Jian Wushuang's fierce attacks. The battle was extremely ferocious. The experts who were watching were burning with enthusiasm. The fight merely lasted for a short while before Luo Xianzi stopped. You live up to your name, Sword Emperor. Not only can you control the 4 fierce golden swords, you are also powerful in close body combat. I am impressed. Let's call it a draw for today's match. Luo Xianzi said. Draw. Jian Wushuang was surprised, but he nodded. He had to admit that Luo Xianzi was really powerful. At least she as much stronger compared to Palace Master Wu Luo. Her swordsmanship was amazing. He had gone all out to use the 4 golden swords, and he had given full play to his close body combat skill. But in the end, he hadn't had the upper hand at all. Plus, he knew that although Luo Xianzi had given her all, she didn't exactly go all out. There were many tricks that she had never performed, such as in the fight where Luo Xianzi had gained fame. She had injured a peak emperor god with 1 stroke. That was Luo Xianzi's strongest stroke, but she didn't show it. Of course, Luo Xianzi held herself back. Same went for Jian Wushuang. After all, they didn't share any resentment, and it was merely a bet that didn't affect Luo Xianzi much, so it wasn't worth it for her to risk her all. Emperor Sword Sect Master. Luo Xianzi looked at Emperor Sword Sect Master. His gaze grew cold. I already tried my best, but in the end you saw what happened. As for what happens next, you can decide on your own. Hearing what Luo Xianzi had said, Emperor Sword Sect Master and the other Almighties looked bitter. At first, they had thought that with Luo Xianzi getting involved, they would be able to resolve the issue. They had never thought that Luo Xianzi couldn't take Jian Wushuang down. Then, they continued to face the two options before. Either they yielded, or they would endure a drowning disaster. Although Emperor Sword Sect Master was arrogant, he definitely wouldn't take Emperor Sword Sect's life and death as a joke. Then, Emperor Sword Sect Master took a deep breath and bowed to Jian Wushuang. Sword Emperor, today, it's Emperor Sword Sect's fault. We are willing to apologize to you. As for the 1,000,000 doctrine gems, we will go and prepare them now. At least you're not that stupid. Jian Wushuang glanced at Emperor Sword Sect Master. He could tell that Emperor Sword Sect Master was unwilling, but there was more fear than that. It was obvious that his power had deterred Emperor Sword Sect Master, unless he was really on the brink of death. Otherwise, Emperor Sword Sect Master wouldn't have the guts to attack him. As he had achieved such an effect, it was unnecessary for Jian Wushuang to continue to massacre Emperor Sword Sect Master. Emperor Sword Palace would only open after some time. During this time, I will stay at Emperor Sword Sect. I hope Emperor Sword Sect Master can make some arrangements for me. Jian Wushuang said. Sure. Emperor Sword Sect Master quivered, but nodded heavily. Jian Wushuang had killed one of their almighties and hurt a few of their men. Emperor Sword Sect had had to apologize, and they had to even arrange Jian Wushuang's shelter and food. Emperor Sword Sect Master was naturally aggrieved, but he finally understood a principle. That was the principle where absolute power was enough to suppress any rule. Then, Emperor Sword Sect Master became wiser. He didn't dare make it difficult for Jian Wushuang anymore. Jian Wushuang only stayed in Emperor Sword Sect as he waited patiently for Emperor Sword Palace to open. As they waited, the news of what had happened in Emperor Sword Sect quickly spread in eternal chaotic world. One person had suppressed one sect. Emperor Sword Sect was forced to yield. Jian Wushuang hadn't had the lower hand in the fight with Luo Xianzi. At the same time, he had displayed his terrifying close body combat skill. Most importantly, when Jian Wushuang was fighting at close quarters with Luo Xianzi, his 4 golden swords weren't affected at all. Everyone in eternal chaotic world had a new understanding of Jian Wushuang's fighting power. Back then, there were many people who had been in doubt of Jian Wushuang's ranking on Heaven and Earth Supreme ranking list. They had thought Jian Wushuang shouldn't be ahead of Emperor God Tianling. They had thought Jian Wushuang's 4 Hongjun golden swords were scary, but Emperor God Tianling could totally withstand it. The moment the 4 golden swords couldn't put him in an advantageous position, Emperor God Tianling would be able to defeat Jian Wushuang. But then, Jian Wushuang had proven himself to everyone with his battle achievements. He had more than one trick up his sleeve. Even if Hongjun Golden Sword couldn't bring him any advantage, he wouldn't be defeated by just anyone. Time flew past, and a few years passed. It had finally come the day Emperor Sword Palace opened. In Emperor Sword Sect, in a lofty hall, the experts who had come for opportunities in sword principle in Emperor Sword Palace sat on both sides of the hall. At the front of the hall, there were 2 people seated on the 2 seats second to the hosts. The 2 of them were Jian Wushuang and Luo Xianzi. The 2 of them looked cold, while the surrounding people stole glances at them occasionally. There was reverence in their glances. Luo Xianzi, Sword Emperor, and everything is ready. We can head to Emperor Sword Palace now. Emperor Sword Sect Master said politely. Chapter 1877 9 Emperor Swords. Let's go. Under the Emperor Sword Sect Master's guidance, Jian Wushuang, Luo Xianzi, and the remaining people headed toward the Emperor Sword Palace in succession. The Emperor Sword Palace was actually a giant standalone space. However, the standalone space was in a locked state most of the time, and it would only open once every 1,000,000 years. It was a pitch-black wormhole, and the wormhole was filled with secrets. Sword Emperor, Luo Xianzi, and everyone else, this is the entrance to the Emperor Sword Palace. Now that this entrance has opened, it will close again after 1,000 years. As time is limited, please go in quickly, the Emperor Sword Sect Master said gently. Jian Wushuang shot a glance toward Emperor Sword Sect Master, and a puzzled expression flashed past his eyes. However, he did not hesitate, and he entered the wormhole with a step. Luo Xianzi and the other 10 experts, as well as the 2 real god geniuses in the Emperor Sword Sect who possessed the Sword Principal Inheritance token, entered the Emperor Sword Palace in succession. In the vast space, the sky was dark red in color, and the ground was dark yellow in color. This is the Emperor Sword Palace. Jian Wushuang looked around the surroundings, and he did not feel anything special in the space right away. However, all of a sudden, a few vague sword essences came from not too far away. Jian Wushuang spread his soul power immediately, and he saw that on a sacrificial altar that was not too far away, there were swords floating about. Looking at it, there was a total of 8 swords. Moreover, the most important thing was that even though the auras of the 8 swords were not released intentionally, they were still extremely powerful. Chaos Divine Treasures? Jian Wushuang's eyes squinted. If his eyes were not wrong, the 8 swords that were floating on the sacrificial altar were Chaos Divine Treasure-level attack-type divine weapons. Moreover, their power was considered extremely shocking among the Chaos Divine Treasures. At the very least, their power was a lot more powerful than Jian Wushuang's Blood Mountain Sword. However, what caused Jian Wushuang to be puzzled was the issue of why would the Emperor Sword Sect allow the 8 powerful Chaos Divine Treasure-level swords to stay in the Emperor Sword Palace. Logically, they should have taken them away a long time ago. Looks like the rumors about the Emperor Swords are indeed correct. A cold voice could be heard, and it was unknown when Luo Xianzi had appeared beside Jian Wushuang. Emperor Swords? Jian Wushuang looked at Luo Xianzi with a puzzled expression. I have only heard of them, Luo Xianzi explained. The Emperor Sword Palace has been left behind by the First Era's Sword Emperor Dugu, who stood at the highest level. Sword Emperor Dugu has not just left behind many sword principal inheritances in the Emperor Sword Palace. At the same time, he left 9 Emperor Swords behind. For those 9 Emperor Swords, each of them is extremely powerful. Among the Chaos Divine Treasures, they could be considered to be at the top. Moreover, the Emperor Swords themselves always contained shocking sword principles to begin with. Back then, due to the founder of the Emperor Sword Sect obtaining an Emperor Sword, the abilities of his sword principles skyrocketed, and from there, he founded the Emperor Sword Sect. However, the Emperor Swords cannot be obtained by any random person. From the day the Emperor Sword Sect was founded to date, after so many years, it is unknown as to how many times the Emperor Sword Palace has opened, and many experts have come to the Emperor Sword Palace to comprehend to the point that their numbers are uncountable. However, it's a pity that only the Emperor Sword Sect Masterback then obtained an Emperor Sword. Apart from that, no one else obtained a second one. Is that so? Jian Wushuang understood. 9 Emperor Swords. At that moment, 8 of them who were in one piece were still lying over there. At that moment, those experts, as well as the 2 real gods from the Emperor Sword Sect, who had come in along with Jian Wushuang and Luo Xianzi, had already headed to the place that the 8 emperor swords were at. When they arrived at the sacrificial altar, all of them attempted to get the emperor swords to recognize them as their master in succession. However, in the end, none of them was recognized by the 8 emperor swords. As for taking the 8 emperor swords away by force, there was no need to even think about it. Sword Emperor, the power of these 8 emperor swords are inexhaustible. Why don't you have a try as well? With your talents, you might be recognized by the emperor swords, Luo Xianzi said. For the emperor swords to recognize someone as their master, they should be looking at one's understanding and comprehension of sword principles. As such, this is not related to one's talents and abilities. Therefore, there is a low chance of the emperor swords recognizing me as their master. As for you, Luo Xianzi, your level of understanding of sword principles is at a much higher level than me. Hence, you should be the one to try instead. Jian Wushuang laughed. I am not in a rush. We have only just entered the Emperor's Sword Palace, and we still have 1,000 years' time to think of ways to raise the cultivation base of our sword principles. After 1,000 years, when I have made progress with regards to my sword principles, it will still not be too late for me to try, Luo Xianzi said. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. Let's go to the place of inheritance. Jian Wushuang and Luo Xianzi walked toward the vast land in front of them immediately. In the center of the Emperor's Sword Palace, which was its core, there was a sword sea. To be exact, it was a sword grave. Within the sword grave, there were countless swords. Be it long swords, sharp swords, soft swords, and heavy swords, there was each and every kind of sword. For these swords, their cutting edges were inserted into the ground. Looking at it, there were probably tens of thousands of swords, and they were inserted into the ground to form a circular shape. Within the 5 corners of the sword grave, each of them had a platform where one could comprehend, and the platforms had already been completely integrated into the sword grave around them. It is said that the sword principle inheritances that the Emperor's Sword Palace contained are extremely useful to cultivators who practice sword principles. Even if a great emperor who is proficient in sword principles were to come to the Emperor's Sword Palace to accept one sword principle inheritance, he would benefit from it considerably. I wonder what the effects are really like. Jian Wushuang laughed. Why not give a try and find out for yourself? Luo Xianzi laughed indifferently. Her figure then turned vague, and she appeared on one of the platforms. In no time, she closed her eyes. Jian Wushuang grinned. He did not hesitate, and he appeared on a platform as well. The moment he stepped on the platform, Jian Wushuang realized immediately that the platform had resonated with the sword principle inheritance token that he possessed. After that, the sword grave that Jian Wushuang was at became completely different. Buzz, 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 buzz. Countless shocking sword essences appeared at almost the same time. The whole sword grave had become a sea of sword essences. Vast and majestic, these sword essences were too vast. Moreover, there were all kinds of sword essences, and it was as if they had covered everything. The sword grave contained tens of thousands of swords. At that moment, Jian Wushuang felt tens of thousands of sword essences. Among the tens of thousands of sword essences, Jian Wushuang did not dare to underestimate any of them. Gosh, all these sword essences. Jian Wushuang was filled with shock. It was not just him. Luo Xianzi, who was at the other training platform, revealed a shocked expression. Countless sword essences flooded the universe, and they gathered quickly to form many clear and powerful sword principles, which appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. There were all kinds of sword principles, and they were extremely advanced. For example, there were sword principles that Jian Wushuang had once opened up and comprehended before. However, they were even more vast and majestic than before. Chapter 1878. Broken sword, too vast, Jian Wushuang muttered. compared to the vast sword principle that he felt before him. The sword principle that he had comprehended before was merely a drop in the ocean. There was not only one sword principle contained in the sword tomb, but various kinds. Jian Wushuang could feel the sword principles very clearly. With slight guidance, he would be able to grasp them. In turn, his understanding of sword principle would improve tremendously. Let's begin. Jian Wushuang settled down very quickly, and he started to comprehend the vast sword principle in the sword tomb wholeheartedly. Not only him, but also Luo Xianzi and the other two real gods from Emperor Sword Sect that had sword principle inheritance tokens started comprehending too. As for experts who didn't have sword principle inheritance tokens, they couldn't enter the sword tomb, but they could only find a place to sit outside of the tomb. Although they couldn't feel the vast sword principles in the sword tomb, it was far behind the few who had sword principle inheritance tokens. The effect might not even be 10% of Jian Wushuang's and the others. But even so, the experts weren't willing to miss the chance. Everyone seized the time and immersed themselves in comprehension. Time flew past. In the blink of an eye, 30 years passed. Every time Emperor's Sword Palace opened, it opened for 1,000 years. It had only been 30 years. It was a short time, but Jian Wushuang opened his eyes again. Emperor's Sword Palace deserved sword cultivators to be crazy about. I only comprehended here for 30 years, and I have improved tremendously in my comprehension of sword principle. In 1,000 years' time, I'm afraid it is insufficient for my sword principle to reach a brand new level. Jian Wushuang clenched his hand, and his eyes were filled with excitement. Although he was thrilled, Jian Wushuang was still suspicious. After 30 years of comprehension, although the power that the sword tomb displayed was enough to surprise him, he felt that the sword tomb wasn't as simple as it looked in its appearance. It wasn't just his gut feeling. It was also a conclusion that he had got from comprehension for 30 years in the sword tomb. The sword tomb had boundless sword principle and sword intention. Although both sword principles and sword intentions were displayed perfectly, Jian Wushuang believed that Sword Emperor Dugu, who had built Emperor's Sword Palace, would have more skills than this. What other mysteries are hidden in the sword tomb? Jian Wushuang creased his eyebrows and stood up slowly. Just as everyone was fully immersed in the comprehension of sword principles and sword intentions, he stood up and walked out of his cultivation platform. In Sword Tomb, Jian Wushuang casually walked as he looked around. With his naked eyes, he couldn't see anything strange about the Sword Tomb. There were many swords in Sword Tomb that had been stabbed into the ground. If there is nothing strange about the sword, then it should be the sword intention, Jian Wushuang muttered. His consciousness blended in the sword tomb, and he started feeling the countless sword intentions. He didn't comprehend, only carefully studied. It took a few years to study it. Jian Wushuang suddenly opened his eyes in shock. These sword intentions are strange. Strange. Jian Wushuang did find it strange. The strangeness was from the sword intention itself, but the direction that sword intention swept to. The sword intention soared, but Jian Wushuang could feel that the sword intention that had swept out was slanted in one direction. Yes, slanted. The slanting position was like it was intentionally drawing closer. If he were to describe it with a term, worship, pilgrimage of tens of thousand swords. Jian Wushuang stared, and he immediately felt every sword intention carefully. In his senses, the tens of thousands of soaring sword intentions were worshipping one direction. In the direction that the sword intention worshipped, Jian Wushuang came to a corner at the border of the sword tomb in the end. Then there was a thick and heavy sword. Most importantly, the heavy sword was broken from the middle. A broken sword. The surface of the broken sword was blotted with rust. It felt as though it was a metal scrap. However, Jian Wushuang could feel that the sword intentions of the tens of thousands of swords were faintly worshipping the broken sword. In the entire sword tomb, only the broken sword had never let out any sword intention since the beginning. It seems that the broken sword is the true core of the sword tomb, Jian Wushuang thought to himself. The sword wasn't right in the middle of sword tomb, but in a corner at the border that was least noticed. There wasn't an aura or sword intention that was given out, and the broken sword seemed to prevent the probing of soul power. Even when he covered the range with soul power, he couldn't feel the existence of the broken sword. This broken sword, I wonder what kind of mystery it is carrying. Jian Wushuang was curious, but he didn't show it. Very soon, he returned to his cultivation platform and closed his eyes to continue comprehending. As for Luo Xianzi and the others, they were comprehending with full concentration. No one noticed him. Then, Jian Wushuang comprehension focused on the broken sword as his core. His consciousness followed the guidance of the sword intention and fixed upon the broken sword. At that moment, the ordinary broken sword with blotted rust made a drastic change in Jian Wushuang's consciousness. The blotted rust instantly disappeared. The originally thick and heavy sword transformed into a 1-meter-long sword in Jian Wushuang's consciousness. It gave out faint golden luster, and on the surface of the blade, there was a dragon-shaped secret pattern. The dragon-shaped secret pattern wiggled slowly as though there was a real dragon that was sealed in the sword. Besides, most importantly, there was a brand new sword intention soaring on the golden sword. The sword intention was supreme. It was like the king of the swords, like the sovereign that rules the world. It was also like the ruler of heaven and earth. The sword intentions of the world took it as their focus. In the sword tomb, the sword intention was like the true prince, while the surrounding tens of thousands of sword intentions were like feudal officials that were worshipping and yielding to it. It was the king of the swords. Just as Jian Wushuang felt the sword intention, his heart quivered. In his head, there was suddenly an image. In the image, there was a middle-aged man in a golden dragon royal robe and golden dragon crown. He was holding the golden sword as his emperor aura swept out, and he wielded the sword. Chapter 1879. Emperor Sword Principle. Sword Principles. Jian Wushuang opened his eyes wide. He could tell that what the emperor had unleashed by swinging the golden sword with dragon veins in the scene was a sword principle with one move. Moreover, it was an extremely frightening sword principle with one move. With one stroke, all beings would submit themselves to the wielder. This was the stroke of an emperor. All the lands under the heavens belonged to the king, and all the people were the king's servants. His stroke represented the supreme power to control the universe. Emperor Sword Principle. A message surfaced in Jian Wushuang's mind and allowed Jian Wushuang to understand that the move that the emperor had unleashed in the scene was the Emperor Sword Principle. As for the process of unleashing it, it was replayed many times in Jian Wushuang's mind continuously. That emperor swung his sword again, and every stroke was exactly the same. This had caused Jian Wushuang to be delighted. Opportunity. A great opportunity. He finally knew the secret that was hidden in the sword grave. It was a shocking sword principle. At that moment, he had found his way into the sword principle, and what he needed to do was to do his best to comprehend the sword principle. Comprehend the sword principle and grasp it. This sword principle is too powerful. It is definitely the most unreasonable, powerful, and supreme sword principle that I have seen so far. Although I am not sure what kind of expert created this secret skill, there's no doubt that I would have another trump card if I were able to grasp this sword principle, Jian Wushuang murmured. Although this sword principle was in the Emperor's Sword Palace, Jian Wushuang knew that it was not created by Sword Emperor Dugu. Although Sword Emperor Dogu was an influential figure in the First Era, it was still impossible for him to create such a sword principle. Hence, this sword principle must have come from the ancient past. Back then, Hall Master Yuan had told him the reason why Sword Emperor Dogu was able to walk around freely in the First Era. Apart from the shocking sword principles that he had created, the most important thing was that he had obtained a sword principle from the ancient past. That sword principle was his most frightening and powerful sword principle. If he was not wrong, the sword principle from the ancient past was this Emperor Sword principle. I have already found an opportunity. Next, no matter what, I must comprehend this Emperor Sword principle. Even if I am unable to comprehend the complete Emperor Sword principle, to me, comprehending one or two sword principles is still considered a huge benefit to me. Jian Wushuang clenched both his fists tightly. Next, he sat down with his legs crossed right away and started to comprehend the scene where the emperor unleashed his sword principle. At that moment, the emperor merely unleashed one stroke, and that stroke was the first move of the Emperor Sword principle. What Jian Wushuang could comprehend, then, was that first move. The Emperor Sword principle was extremely profound and unfathomable. Although Jian Wushuang was extremely talented in terms of comprehension, his progress of comprehending the Emperor Sword principle was still extremely slow. Time passed by. While everyone had focused their hearts and minds into comprehending the sword essences and sword principles, Jian Wushuang was making the best use of his time to comprehend the Emperor Sword principle. In a flash, another 150 years passed. Atop the training platform, Jian Wushuang opened his eyes again, and his eyes were glowing brilliantly. I have finally comprehended the first move of the Emperor Sword principle. Jian Wushuang was excited. He had merely comprehended it, and he had yet to grasp it. However, Jian Wushuang was already extremely delighted. After all, as long as he comprehended it, he could take his time to grasp it in the future. At that moment, since he had comprehended the first move, he could continue to comprehend the second move. As expected, the scene that appeared in his mind had already changed. Similarly, it was the emperor who wore a long robe with golden dragons, and his hands were still holding on to the golden sword with dragon veins. Similarly, he unleashed a stroke. However, his sword principle was completely different from before. Emperor Sword principle. Second move. Jian Wushuang glowed brilliantly. After that, he continued his comprehension. Time was not a concern in training. Out of the 1,000 years' time, 900 years had passed in the blink of an eye, and only 100 years remained. The Jian Wushuang then had stopped his comprehension of the Emperor Sword principle. For the Emperor Sword principle, every move is more profound and powerful than the previous one. Although I have only used 150 years to comprehend the first move, I used another 280 years for the second move. Now, 900 years have passed, and I have only managed to comprehend until the third move. As for the fourth move, the Emperor Sword principle still had the fourth move and fifth move. However, at that moment, Jian Wushuang had only comprehended the first three moves. Moreover, he could only comprehend those three moves. After all, a total of 900 years had passed, and only 100 years remained. As such, comprehending the fourth move was just an extravagant hope. Since I am unable to comprehend the fourth move, I shall make use of the remaining 100 years to comprehend those sword essences and sword principles. Jian Wushuang laughed, and he had already made up his mind. Next, he stopped using his time to comprehend the Emperor Sword principle. He did not attempt to grasp the Emperor Sword principle. Instead, he focused his heart and mind into the comprehension of those sword essences and sword principles. While comprehending, his level of comprehension and understanding of the sword principles rose with a shocking speed. At the same time, Jian Wushuang started to collate all the sword principles that he possessed then. Jian Wushuang was a genuine cultivator who cultivated sword principles. Sword principles were his root. At that moment, Jian Wushuang possessed 3 types of sword principles. The first and second type were the reincarnation sword principle and space-time sword principle that he cultivated respectively. These 2 sword principles were created perfectly from the reincarnation doctrine and space-time doctrine. Hence, when his sword principles were unleashed, they would bring about a vast amount of power of Heaven Wei. As for the third type, it was the Emperor Sword principle. However, Jian Wushuang had only comprehended it, and he had not grasped it yet. As such, he was naturally unable to unleash it. 100 years later, Jian Wushuang's level of understanding and comprehension of the sword principles rose greatly. Thus, his sword principles naturally made a huge breakthrough as well. In terms of the reincarnation sword principle, he had already created the 6th move. As for the space-time sword principle, as his level of comprehension of the space-time doctrine was higher and it had achieved the standard needed to clear the 8th level of the Doctrine Palace, he had managed to create the 7th move. For these 2 sword principles, both of them had made huge improvements. Moreover, with the growth of the sword principles, the power of the Hongjun golden swords rose considerably as well. In other words, Jian Wushuang's abilities as a whole had risen compared to before. Of course, the most important thing was the Emperor Sword principle. However, it was a pity that he did not have the time to grasp it. The moment he grasped it for real and unleashed it successfully, his fighting capabilities would rise again. 1,000 years' time is almost up. My gains are extremely huge. Next, it's time to leave. Jian Wushuang laughed, and his eyes could help but turn to the broken sword which was at the very edge of the sword grave, and was not eye-catching in the slightest bit. The broken sword, which was full of rust, was still stuck in the ground, and there was no movement at all. Only Jian Wushuang had realized what was different about it. As for the other people, from the start to the end, they had never noticed the existence of the broken sword. What a pity! If there were more time, I might have been able to completely comprehend the complete Emperor Sword principle. Jian Wushuang felt that it was a pity. Chapter 1880, Owner Recognition. The time limit of 1,000 years had passed. Those people who had immersed themselves in the comprehension of sword principle and sword intention opened their eyes simultaneously. In the past 1,000 years, regardless of Luo Xianzi and the few who had cultivated on cultivation platform in Sword Tomb, or those experts who could only stay outside of the Sword Tomb because they didn't have sword principle inheritance token, they had gained a bountiful harvest. Most of them were wearing smiles on their faces, but there were, of course, some that looked regretful. They were unhappy that the time was so short, and they didn't improve much in their swordsmanship. Sword Emperor, Luo Xianzi appeared next to Jian Wushuang. How did it go? Not bad. How about yourself? Jian Wushuang smiled. Not too bad. My comprehension in sword principle has increased by quite a bit. Luo Xianzi said, I heard that not only are there great opportunities in Emperor Sword Palace, there is also a terrifying sword technique. But it's a pity that although I comprehended carefully and tried to look for it, I couldn't find it. That sword technique must rely on luck, Jian Wushuang replied. That's true. Luo Xianzi nodded. Emperor Sword Palace has been opened many times. Over the years, only the founders of Emperor Sword Sect received the sword technique. I am confident that I am not much weaker in comprehension than the founder of Emperor Sword Sect, but I am not as lucky as him. Jian Wushuang smiled faintly, but didn't speak. The broken sword was too obscure. Even the worshipping sword intention was extremely ambiguous. Jian Wushuang could find it not only through years of studies, but it also largely depended on luck. As for comprehension of sword principle that relied on one's gifted talent, they didn't talk anymore and walked to the exit of the Emperor's Sword Palace. When they arrived at the exit, Jian Wushuang realized that the expert who had entered Emperor's Sword Palace together walked to the altar of the 8 king swords again. When they had first arrived at Emperor's Sword Palace, the experts had already tried owner recognition once. After 1,000 years of comprehension, these experts obviously wanted to try a second time. It was a pity that their second try failed as well. Jian Wushuang, these people failed. Now, there are 2 of us left, you and I. Who shall go first? Luo Xianzi looked at Jian Wushuang. King Sword's owner recognition. Everyone who entered Emperor's Sword Palace would give it a try regardless of the outcome. After all, even if owner recognition failed, they had nothing to lose. But once there was a king sword that recognized one as its owner, the person would be gained abundantly. You go ahead first, Jian Wushuang smiled. Luo Xianzi didn't refuse and immediately walked towards the altar. When she came to the altar, Luo Xianzi started owner recognition with the first king sword. When she failed, she continued to the second. Very soon, Luo Xianzi had tried all 8 king swords. The end result was that none of the king swords responded. Luo Xianzi bitterly smiled as she walked back. The surrounding experts saw and sighed emotionally. Even Luo Xianzi failed. It seems that king sword's owner recognition isn't that easy. Over the years, besides the founder of Emperor's Sword Sect, there is no one who has gotten a king sword. Although Luo Xianzi was powerful, she seems to be slightly behind from king sword's owner recognition standards. Luo Xianzi already tried. Now, there's only Jian Wushuang left. I wonder if he has the luck to make one of the king swords recognize him as owner. I admit that he is powerful, but his understanding of sword principle isn't higher than Luo Xianzi's. Luo Xianzi couldn't do it. Jian Wushuang shouldn't be able to do it either. The surrounding people were whispering. Luo Xianzi already returned to Jian Wushuang. It seems like I am not lucky enough to get the king's sword. Emperor's sword. There's only you left who stands a chance to get king's sword to recognize you as its owner, Luo Xianzi said. Luo Xianzi, you failed to do so, and I will only be the same. Jian Wushuang said, who knows if you don't try? Maybe you're lucky enough. Luo Xianzi said. Although Luo Xianzi said so, she obviously didn't think that Jian Wushuang could succeed either. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows. Then he walked towards the altar without hesitation. In front of everyone, Jian Wushuang approached the altar. However, before he reached the altar, when he was still 100 meters away, Virum, there were 8 terrifying sword intentions that suddenly soared up from the altar. The 8 sword intentions had existed previously, but they were quite ambiguous and they weren't strong. However, at that very moment, the sword intentions intensified multiple times. Before the experts' eyes, the 8 king swords that were floating quietly at the altar suddenly shook vigorously. Such vigorous shiver was obviously showing of excitement and wild joy. Everyone was shocked at the sight. How did it? This is when we went to try for owner recognition. The 8 king swords didn't even move. Now, Jian Wushuang merely got closer to them, and the 8 king swords are so drastically different, and they became so excited. How is it possible? The surrounding experts were astonished. Especially Luo Xianzi, she was shocked. When divine weapons recognize their owners, don't they rely on power and comprehension of sword principle? In terms of power, she wasn't any weaker than Jian Wushuang. In terms of comprehension of sword principle, she was stronger than Jian Wushuang. Even she didn't cause the 8 king swords to respond, but they shook vigorously at the same time when Jian Wushuang appeared. Could it be? Luo Xianzi's eyes dilated. She figured out a possibility. The possibility was quickly determined. Sword Emperor definitely received the hidden, terrifying secret skill from the sword tomb. Yes, definitely so. Otherwise, the 8 king swords definitely wouldn't be so excited. Disregarding everyone's astonishment, Jian Wushuang continued to walk forward. Very soon, he arrived at the altar. When he stepped foot onto the altar, the 8 king swords were in a commotion. Every single king swords flew over from each corner of the altar and stood before Jian Wushuang. All of them were quivering as though they were trying to ingratiate themselves with Jian Wushuang. It seemed to be a battle among the king swords. The king swords are fighting to recognize Jian Wushuang as their owner. The surrounding people were dumbfounded. Even Jian Wushuang was surprised. He had comprehended king sword principle, and he had already expected that the king swords might want to recognize him as owner when he went forward for owner recognition. But he had never expected that the 8 king swords would be that excited, and they would be fighting to recognize him as owner. Chapter 1881. Rejected. Jian Wushuang did not know. The 8 emperor swords were extremely intelligent, and they knew how to choose their master. Moreover, they were emperor swords which were born specially for the emperor sword principle. In the emperor sword palace, they would not care about experts who practiced normal sword principles. Only people who had comprehended the emperor sword principles via the sword grave had the right to be their master. For example, back then, the founder of the emperor sword sect had managed to get one emperor sword to recognize him as its master, as he had comprehended the emperor sword principle. However, the founder of the emperor sword sect's affinity for comprehension was limited. After spending 1,000 years of time, he had only barely managed to comprehend the first move of the emperor sword principle. Hence, he had barely achieved the requirement for them to recognize him as their master. But what about Jian Wushuang? Similarly, it had also been 1,000 years. To be exact, he had merely used 870 years of time. With that, he had managed to comprehend the first 3 moves of the emperor sword principle. As such, his talents for comprehending were many times higher than that of the founder of the emperor sword sect. Hence, those emperor swords had fought amongst one another to recognize a genius like him as their master. The 8 of you, as Jian Wushuang looked at the 8 emperor swords which were shaking crazily, he laughed indifferently. Since all of you are willing to recognize me as your master, why don't all of you leave with me? It was obvious that Jian Wushuang had the intention to take away all the 8 emperor swords. It should be known that the 8 emperor swords were 8 extremely powerful chaos divine treasures. However, after hearing Jian Wushuang's words, the 8 emperor swords became vehement. Jian Wushuang's expression changed slightly, and he continued to communicate with the 8 emperor swords. As for those experts who were not too far away, when they saw such a scene, they had puzzled expressions. Moreover, most of them were also looking at Jian Wushuang with envy. That's right. It was envy. They had done their very best, and they yearned for even one emperor sword to recognize them as its master. In the end, none of them emperor swords was willing to accept them. As for Jian Wushuang, the emperor swords fought among one another to recognize him as its master. Such a difference was really extremely huge. All of a sudden, humph, with a cold snort, the expression of Jian Wushuang, who was communicating with the 8 emperor swords, turned cold abruptly. He then waved his big hands, and he completely ignored the 8 emperor swords, no matter how much noise they made or shook. After that, he turned his body and left without turning his head back at all. The 8 emperor swords continued to make noises intensely. However, after that, they returned to their own positions in succession, and in no time, they quietened down. Such a scene had caused everyone present to become dumbfounded. Sword Emperor, what's going on? Luo Xianzi walked in front of Jian Wushuang immediately. Just now, those 8 Emperor Swords wanted to recognize you as their master, right? That's right. They had planned to recognize me as their master. Moreover, I can choose any of them. However, they were all rejected by me, Jian Wushuang said right away. You rejected them? Luo Xianzi opened her eyes wide. The surrounding people were also filled with disbelief. Although the Emperor Swords wanted to recognize Jian Wushuang as their master, they were all rejected by Jian Wushuang in the end. Why did he reject them? How could reject them? Just now, I communicated with those Emperor Swords, and I plan to take all of them away. However, it's a pity that the 8 Emperor Swords are extremely arrogant. Indeed, as Emperor Swords which stand at the top, they are naturally extremely arrogant. As such, they are not satisfied with sharing the same master with any other swords at the same time. Therefore, not only would they not recognize me as their master at the same time, the moment one of them recognized me as its master, I could only use it as my only weapon for sword principles. They are really unreasonable, Jian Wushuang sneered. He had seen unreasonable people and unreasonable sects before. However, this was the first time that he had seen unreasonable swords. The 8 Emperor Swords were indeed extremely unreasonable and arrogant. As such, they would definitely not allow other swords to share a same master with them. However, for those Emperor Swords to be so unreasonable, this also shows how powerful they are. Even if you were to use it as your only weapon for sword principles in the future, wouldn't it not be a loss? Luo Xianzi could not help but ask. The surrounding people nodded their heads earnestly. The more unreasonable a sword was, the more frightening its power was. Since the Emperor Swords were so unreasonable, they would definitely be extremely powerful. With such a weapon on hand, why would they still need to use other swords? Hence, almost everyone present would agree to that condition without hesitation. However, Jian Wushuang rejected it. I already have my own weapon. Even if the Emperor Sword were to recognize me as its master, it would still be in second place in my heart. Wanting me to abandon my own weapon and use it as my only weapon is just some nonsense spouted by an idiot. Jian Wushuang's eyes were ice cold. When he had communicated with the 8 Emperor Swords moments ago, the moment he knew their request, he had become furious at once. There was no doubt that the 8 Emperor Swords were extremely powerful. At the very least, among the sword-type weapons that Jian Wushuang had seen, none of them was stronger than the 8 Emperor Swords. Even when placed in the ancient past, the 8 Emperor Swords could also be considered first-rate treasures. However, although the Emperor Swords were powerful, his Blood Mountain Sword was not weak. Perhaps the power of the Blood Mountain Sword, then, was far from being comparable to that of the 8 Emperor Swords. However, the Blood Mountain Sword was an embryo sword, and there was still a huge room for it to grow. When it grew up completely in the future, it would not be weaker than the 8 Emperor Swords in the slightest. Moreover, it might even be stronger. Furthermore, the Blood Mountain Sword came from his master, and it was something that his master had bestowed upon him personally. Hence, it contained his master's feelings. The most important thing was the position that the Blood Mountain Sword had in Jian Wushuang's heart. It should be known that starting from the Green Fire world, Jian Wushuang had always fought with the Blood Mountain Sword side by side, and to date, it was unknown how many years it had been. Just like the king of venomous worms, the Blood Mountain Sword was a battle companion that he had trusted the most, and it was also his brother. Not to mention 1 Emperor Sword. Even if 8 Emperor Swords, 80 Emperor Swords, or even 800 Emperor Swords were used, he would absolutely not abandon the Blood Mountain Sword. As such, moments ago, he had rejected the 8 Emperor Swords without hesitation and left. Of course, to other people, It was absurd. It was to the extent that some people could not help but roar within their hearts. Although they had done their very best, they were still unable to obtain the big opportunity that was given to Jian Wushuang for free. Moreover, among the 8 emperor swords, Jian Wushuang could pick any of them. In the end, Jian Wushuang had rejected all of them? What kind of resolve was that? Also, how big was the gap between them and Jian Wushuang? When they looked at the comparison, it was really infuriating. The recognition of masters by the emperor swords has come to an end. Luo Xianzi, let's go out. Jian Wushuang looked at Luo Xianzi. Although Luo Xianzi had not completely calmed down yet upon hearing Jian Wushuang's words, she nodded her head. Before she left, her eyes could not help but glance at the 8 emperor swords again. She then sighed lightly. After that, she left the Emperor Sword Palace via the exit. As for the remaining experts, although they had mixed feelings, they were also extremely upset. However, it was a pity that the Emperor Swords had chosen to recognize Jian Wushuang as their master instead of them. As such, they could not do anything and could only leave with dissatisfaction. The vast Emperor Sword Palace became peaceful again, and only the 8 Emperor Swords, which stood upright atop the sacrificial altar proudly, like before, remained. Perhaps after many years, someone would comprehend the Emperor Sword principle in the sword grave and take some of them away. However, this person would definitely not be Jian Wushuang. Chapter 1882. Jealous. Outside Emperor Sword Palace, Emperor Sword Sect Master, and the others were waiting patiently. After Jian Wushuang and the others came out from Emperor Sword Palace, they went forward to greet them. Not long after Jian Wushuang and the others had exited Emperor Sword Palace, the entrance to Emperor Sword Palace closed. The next opening would be another 1 million years later. Gu Deng, has there been any incident in Emperor Sword Palace in the past 1,000 years? Emperor Sword Sect Master looked at a young man in a red robe. The young man in the red robe, real god Gu Deng, entered Emperor Sword Palace with Jian Wushuang and Luo Xianzi. During the 1,000 years of comprehension, nothing happened. But in the end, real god Gu Deng reported to Emperor Sword Sect Master in all honesty. What? King Swords recognized Jian Wushuang as their owner, and he rejected them? The people from Emperor Sword Sect were shocked. Emperor Sword Sect Master was staring into the void as unprecedented jealousy burnt. One should know that King Sword's owner recognition was a great opportunity. In the history of Emperor Sword Sect, there was only the founder, his master, who had received a king's sword. With the king's sword, the founder of Emperor Sword Sect was extremely scary. If it were to be in the current times, he could absolutely be in the top 20 in heaven and earth's supreme ranking list. He might not even be too far off from the number 1 emperor god, underworld god. It was a pity that the founder of Emperor Sword Sect had passed away because of a danger he had come across when he was wandering in ancient mystery land many years ago. Then he took control of Emperor Sword Sect. However, in terms of power, opportunities, or even disposition, he was far behind his master. He had taken control of Emperor Sword Sect for so many years, the power of Emperor Sword Sect didn't get stronger, but weaker instead. As for King Swords in Emperor Sword Palace, his desire to get King Swords was far higher than anyone else's. He wanted to reach the level of his master through King Sword's owner recognition, but it was a pity that he had failed countless times in Emperor Sword Palace. But Jian Wushuang, King Swords took the initiative to recognize him as the owner, but he had rejected them. Emperor Sword Sect Master was, of course, jealous. Of course, no matter how jealous he was, Emperor Sword Sect Master didn't dare to show it. Sword Emperor Luo Xianzi, Emperor Sword Palace is closed, and it will be opened again in another 1 million years. I wonder if the 2 of you would like to stay in Emperor Sword Sect, or Emperor Sword Sect Master asked humbly. There are many things to be taken care of in lineage of star. I shall not trouble you further, Jian Wushuang replied. I shall leave too. Luo Xianzi looked cold. If so, I shall send the two of you off. Emperor Sword Sect Master was extremely courteous. Jian Wushuang and Luo Xianzi didn't stay and left Emperor Sword Sect as Emperor Sword Sect Master saw them off. In the void outside Emperor Sword Sect, Jian Wushuang and Luo Xianzi stood side by side. Sword Emperor, Emperor Sword Sect Master looks to be polite to you, but I can tell that he harbored hatred in him, Luo Xianzi said. Hee, I took action to corner the entire Emperor Sword Sect, and I even killed one of their Sir Gods. It'd be weird if Emperor Sword Sect Master didn't hate me, Jian Wushuang laughed. Not only Luo Xianzi could tell, but Jian Wushuang also saw through him. He was so readable. Plus, Jian Wushuang knew that Emperor Sword Sect Master was temporarily fearful of his power, and he didn't dare to display his hatred. Hence, his humble behavior. But in actual fact, he was dying to suck his blood dry and eat his flesh. Besides, Jian Wushuang was sure that when the Master of Star Palace's death was verified in no time, all forces and experts would launch an attack on Lineage of Star with all sorts of reasons. Emperor Sword Sect would definitely hit them when they were down. That was a definite. However, even though Jian Wushuang knew that for sure, he couldn't just destroy Emperor Sword Sect. Emperor Sword Sect, in Eternal Chaotic World, their foundation and power in Sanctuary Alliance are too solid. It's okay if I just teach Emperor Sword Sect Master a lesson casually. Sanctuary Alliance wouldn't care. But if I were to destroy Emperor Sword Sect directly just because Emperor Sword Sect Master made it difficult for me, it would instigate dissatisfaction in the higher-ups of Sanctuary Alliance. Plus, Emperor Sword Sect already lowered their heads before me. Jian Wushuang thought to himself. Lineage of Star was already at the heart of the struggle. Among the higher-ups on Sanctuary Alliance, there were some who were hostile towards Lineage of Star, or even to him. However, there were also some that anticipated and looking forward to him growing and becoming one of the major powers of Sanctuary Alliance. In other words, those who supported him. Between the two, there should be restrictions to one another. However, if Jian Wushuang were to destroy Emperor Sword Sect for trivial matters, although Sanctuary Alliance wouldn't do anything to him, it was inevitable that those higher-ups who were originally on his side would become unhappy. That was not something Jian Wushuang wanted. In Sanctuary Alliance, all forces are complicated. Like the saying, pull one hair and the whole body is affected. To Lineage of Star now, the most important factor is the higher-ups in Sanctuary Alliance, the standing of the great emperors. He couldn't let their standpoints waver. At least, not until after the danger period. As for Emperor Sword Sect, humph, they are just clowns. Even if I don't destroy them now, when the war explodes, I will destroy them if they dare to join the war. Jian Wushuang didn't care much about Emperor Sword Sect. In Eternal Chaotic World, among the major forces who intend to fight Lineage of Star, there were many that were stronger than Emperor Sword Sect. Even if there was really a war, forces like Emperor Sword Sect weren't too many if there was one extra, weren't too few if there was one less. It didn't matter. Sword Emperor, as you know clearly, I shall not comment further. Goodbye, Luo Xianzi said, and then turned to leave. Jian Wushuang watched as Luo Xianzi leave. Then, he waved, and an ancient silver spaceship appeared in the void before him. Jian Wushuang entered the cabin, and it started traveling at a terrifyingly fast speed to Lineage of Star. With the speed of the silver spaceship, he would arrive in Lineage of Star in no time. However, the silver spaceship only traveled for half a day before it ran into mishap. In the vast, dark void, the ancient spaceship was traveling at a fast speed. However, Just as the silver spaceship flew past a piece of void, the surroundings suddenly filled with blurry fog, and as the spaceship continued to plunge forward, the gray fog grew thicker. Jian Wushuang in the cabin instantly noticed the changes in the void outside the spaceship. His eyes dilated in shock. It seems that my journey back won't be smooth sailing. Chapter 1883, Boatman in Black. The void was filled with blurry fog. The huge, ancient silver spaceship vanished into thin air, while Jian Wushuang stood arrogantly alone. Jian Wushuang's gaze was like lightning. He stared forward with a tinge of coldness. In the void that Jian Wushuang was staring at, there were ripples spreading in the water. In the thick gray fog, there was a simple wooden boat. On the boat, there was an elderly paddling. The elderly was scrawny and tan-skinned. He was shabbily dressed in black with a bamboo hat. Judging by his looks, he was no different from an ordinary boatman. However, after the boatman in black appeared, Jian Wushuang's heart skipped a beat and his face grew solemn. The wooden boat emerged from the gray fog and continued to travel forward until it was 100 miles away from Jian Wushuang before it stopped. "I wonder who you are. Why do you block my route?" Jian Wushuang remained at the same spot as his voice spread. "Hee, I am a nobody. My name, Sword Emperor, doesn't have to bother. I came here today for only one matter." The boatman in black smiled and said in a gentle voice, "What's the matter?" Jian Wushuang asked, "Sword Emperor, what do you think about this fish?" The boatman in black suddenly pointed in one direction of the void. Jian Wushuang suddenly looked and realized that the void filled with ripples while in the water, there was a huge carp that weighed about 3 jin that jumped out. It was so vivid, as though it was real. The moment the carp jumped out, Jian Wushuang became heavily guarded. Vroom vroom. Jian Wushuang's consciousness was heavily affected. As the image turned, Jian Wushuang came to an ordinary courtyard. In the courtyard, there was a young maiden in snow-white blouse. She was practicing her sword principle while a young man sat by the side and gave pointers casually. He pointed out the young maiden's flaw in her sword principle. The courtyard wasn't huge, but it was a great place to practice swordsmanship. Although it had been years, Jian Wushuang could determine with a glance that the courtyard was where he used to practice swordsmanship when he was young. It was Sword Marquis Mansion. The young maiden in the snow-white blouse was Jian Menger, who had once been entangled with him. The young man who was sitting by the side and giving pointers was him in his younger times. The familiar sight was replayed perfectly. Sword Marquis Mansion, Jian Menger. It has been a while. Jian Wushuang's eyes suddenly turned sharp. Only dreamland. How could it affect me? Jian Wushuang thought, and he instantly plunged towards his true, with unprecedented determination. The image of younger times that he had missed immediately shattered with shockingly fast speed. Finally, the image shattered completely. Jian Wushuang continued to stand arrogantly into the void that was filled with gray fog, while the wooden boat in front of him remained at the same spot. However, the boatman in black, who was originally on the wooden boat, disappeared. Psst, extremely soft. If it was any other ordinary almighty, he wouldn't be able to hear the sound, but there was a chilly gleam in Jian Wushuang's eyes. Go! A low roar and Blood Mountain sword was out of its scabbard. Jian Wushuang wielded his sword and brought about boundless sword intention. Simultaneously, it shook off the space-time. The stroke was space-time sword principle that Jian Wushuang created through the combination of his studies about space-time doctrine and sword principle. In space-time sword principle, Jian Wushuang had already created the 7th move, and he was merely performing until the 5th move. Dang! Along with a loud clash, the boatman in black's figure flew backward. There was murderous intention soaring from Jian Wushuang's body. With his willpower, the 4 Hongjun golden swords ascended and turned into 4 rays of resplendent golden light. They chased after the boatman in black at lightning speed. Hee, the boatman in black smiled maliciously. As he retreated, his figure instantly blended into the surrounding gray fog and vanished. Jian Wushuang grew distressed while the 4 Hongjun golden swords immediately stopped. He glanced around and swept out his soul power over the widest range. However, his soul power couldn't see through the surrounding grue fog. He knew that boatman in black should be around, but he couldn't determine the boatman in black's exact location. King of venomous worms, would your secret skill be able to locate him? Jian Wushuang asked. His current power had already reached the top of Emperor God level. Although King of venomous worms had already transformed into full-foot plenilun, his scariest power was actually recovery power. In ferocious fights, it was difficult for him to assist Jian Wushuang. However, he had many auxiliary skills. For example, King of venomous worms knew a secret skill, whereby whenever someone got close to Jian Wushuang, King of venomous worms would instantly be alerted, and he would remind Jian Wushuang. King of venomous worms shook his head when he heard Jian Wushuang. I can't. Maybe due to the surrounding gray fog, my secret skill wasn't working when I performed it. I see. Jian Wushuang's gaze fixed. He could tell that his opponent was well prepared. For instance, the surrounding thick gray fog should be a formation. Who are you exactly? Jian Wushuang's voice was cold as it spread in the surrounding void. Ever since he had started cultivating, he had offended countless enemies. There were quite a number of them who wanted him dead. However, his power was on display. There shouldn't be many who had the guts to scheme against him. However, the boatman in black that he had come across, he had never heard of him nor seen him before, but he posed a great threat. One should know that the magic skill earlier, in Jian Wushuang's view, it was definitely the most realistic and scariest magic skill. If it wasn't because he was an inverse cultivator, and his mental state had been in training to the point that he had already reached the peak of the 3rd level of mental state, he wouldn't be able to shake off that dreamland forcefully. Plus, the boatman in black's assassination skill was really scary. He could say that the boatman in black was definitely one of the strongest assassins he had seen so far. Hee, Sword Emperor, I said that I only have one purpose for this trip. The purpose is naturally to kill you. His gentle voice spread from all directions, and Jian Wushuang wasn't sure in which direction the voice came from. Nor did he know the location of the boatman in black. Just then, Virum! A strange bolt of power charged to Jian Wushuang without any signs before. Soul attack. Jian Wushuang's face changed. Chapter 1884. Disperse soul attack was considered to be Jian Wushuang's weak point. Previously, he had spent a large number of resources to improve his soul. Then, he already formed a substantive soul, and substantive soul was extremely strong, far beyond any ordinary Sir God's. Such a powerful soul was also sturdier. Besides, he had already found a soul ring in the ancient battlefield back in Greenfire World. Although the soul ring was damaged badly, it had great defense power towards soul attack. It was Jian Wushuang's soul's reliance. The power of the boatman in black that he was dealing with was unfathomable. The soul attack that he had performed, Jian Wushuang wasn't sure if he could withstand it. Terrifying soul power was like a sharp sword that tore everything and charged towards Jian Wushuang's substantive soul. At first, it was hindered by the soul ring, and its power was diminished by half. The rest of the power was also blocked off by soul walls that Jian Wushuang had put up temporarily. In the middle of the blurry void, Jian Wushuang clenched his teeth as he stood there. His face looked gloomy. Just as the soul power hit his substantive soul, his body quivered. There was a sharp pain that caused the veins on his forehead to pop up as though his head was going to explode. Fortunately, although there was a sharp pain, his substantive soul withstood the soul attack, and H was only slightly injured. Luckily, I purposefully spent a large number of resources to improve my soul strength. Luckily, I got a soul ring from the ancient battlefield. Otherwise, Jian Wushuang had yet to recover from the attack. He knew that if there were to be lack of the factors, he would have been killed by the soul attack directly. Suddenly, there was a shrill scream across the void. Jian Wushuang's eyes quickly dilated. He had barely withstood the soul attack earlier, but the boatman in black's attack descended again. The speed was too fast and too sudden. The most crucial part was that Jian Wushuang had no idea where the location of the boatman in black was before he attacked. When he realized the boatman in black was already behind him, the attack was launched at a close distance. Moon-picking skill. A boundless divine power and bloodline power suddenly erupted. The strongest secret skill of ancient god, moon-picking skill, was performed instantly. Then, the moon-picking skill that Jian Wushuang performed was aiming at the void that he was in. Rumble. The surrounding sky and space-time instantly pressed down. Not only the boatman in black, but also Jian Wushuang himself felt the pressing of the space-time and was greatly restricted. Comparatively, Jian Wushuang was far less restricted. Jian Wushuang slanted his body, and the black light that was swung by the boatman in black flew past. I dodged it. Jian Wushuang was surprised. Moon-picking skill was originally used to pressure opponent using space-time, while he launched a full attack at his opponent. Then, Jian Wushuang had used it to dodge the attack. Very smart indeed. The boatman in black was shocked. Just as Jian Wushuang was driving 4 Hongjun golden swords and prepared to counterattack, the boatman in black blended into the surrounding gray fog again and disappeared from within Jian Wushuang's sensory range. The asterisk minute. Jian Wushuang looked distressed. Jian Wushuang, this guy merged with the surrounding gray fog, and it is hard to trace him. As long as the gray fog is here, he can attack and retreat as he wishes. Only he could attack you, but you couldn't attack him. In other words, he is invincible, King of Venomous Worms said in Jian Wushuang's head. If so, I shall disperse the gray fog. Jian Wushuang fixed his gaze upon the fog. Ancient god unique skill, universal laws. Virum, 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 virum. The void shook, and there were huge ancient god shadows that appeared behind Jian Wushuang. With one glance, there seemed to be more than hundreds, thousands of shadows. These shadows were substantiated by boundless divine power. Reincarnation palm. Jian Wushuang roared, and a palm containing boundless reincarnation power slapped. The crowded ancient god shadows behind him also gathered boundless divine power, and then they swung their palms too. They were all reincarnation palms. One should know that reincarnation palm derived from Jian Wushuang's comprehension of the shocking palm that one-star man left in his head the other day. In terms of power, it was also considered a fierce secret skill, and the divine power that required was not little. An ordinary Sir God could at most perform over a dozen palms after a vigorous fight. However, Jian Wushuang himself, and also ancient god shadows that he had formed, performed the palm. The expense of divine power. An ordinary Sir God wouldn't be able to withstand it. But Jian Wushuang could perform it straightforwardly. Hum, 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 hum. Listening to vigorous explosions. The palms that seemed to contain the entire reincarnation attacked the surrounding void. The surrounding void shattered and broke. Only with one round of attacks, the tens of millions of miles void that Jian Wushuang was in had shattered into pieces. Even space was non-existent. The gray fog in the space was naturally swallowed up mercilessly. Without the hindrance of the gray fog, Jian Wushuang finally locked gazes with the boatman in black. The boatman in black was standing in the void, about 10,000 miles away. Hee, you are truly an inverse cultivator. Your divine power is boundless. With such attacks, the required divine power should be huge, but you could perform it with ease, without any pressure, the boatman in black complimented. Even though the surrounding gray fog had dispersed, he wasn't in a hurry. Now you and I can fight a fair fight. Jian Wushuang's eyes were cold. Just as he spoke, swoosh, 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 swoosh. The 4 golden lights instantly burst out. The speed was enough to strike fear into an ordinary emperor god. Jian Wushuang gave full play to his comprehension of space-time doctrine. Plus, from the increase in his understanding of sword principle, the power of the 4 Hongjun golden swords was much stronger than before. Even without the assistance of the gray fog, I can still kill you. The boatman in black smiled maliciously. When the 4 golden lights appeared in front of him, the black saber that gave out dim light in his hand suddenly shuttled through the 4 golden lights instantly, like a poisonous snake. The 4 golden lights instantly moved to the side from the impact, while the boatman in black didn't stop but appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. Wow! Boundless dim light flowed out, and a black saber descended. Jian Wushuang could only feel that he had instantly fallen into boundless darkness. Chapter 1885. One high humph. Jian Wushuang harumphed coldly, while his blood mountain sword let out a shrill whistle. The sword light instantly burst out along with boundless reincarnation power. The stroke was reincarnation sword principle, the 6th move. It was also the most powerful stroke among reincarnation sword principle that Jian Wushuang had created. Under the trigger of Jian Wushuang's fierce divine power and bloodline power, the power of the stroke was extremely terrifying. Clang! The sound of metal clanged, and Jian Wushuang took a few steps back from the impact. Just as he retreated, hum! A boundless bloodline aura spread, and Jian Wushuang's figure suddenly increased in size and instantly turned into black jade colors. Simultaneously, there were heads and arms extending from his body. Ancient tribe body revealed itself with 7 heads and 14 arms. Jian Wushuang's fighting power suddenly reached its peak. Die! The 4 Hongjun golden swords flew out with ferocious sword intention, while Jian Wushuang's 14 arms wielded a sword each and attacked. The boatman in black wasn't afraid and swung out his black saber continuously. Dang! 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 There were vigorous clashes of blades in the void. Jian Wushuang had already given full play to his swordsmanship and his close combat skill in collaboration with an intense attack of Hongjun golden sword. Even so, the boatman in black was responding rather at ease. Sword Emperor, compared to when you fought with Palace Master Wu Luo from Abysmal Palace 1,000 years ago, your swordsmanship has improved tremendously. The boatman in black smiled, and his figure suddenly became creepy. Just like the reflection in the mirror, he appeared in 3 different places in the void. When Jian Wushuang swept out his consciousness and located the boatman in black, the latter appeared next to him. Then, the black saber was swept at him again. The darkness was as usual and the power was soaring. Bang! Jian Wushuang was pushed out by the impact. After Jian Wushuang steadied himself, his cold eyes locked onto the boatman in black as his face grew solemn. This person is so strong. Strong, he was really strong. One should know that 1,000 years ago, Jian Wushuang had collaborated his close combat skills with his Hongjun golden swords, and he had matched evenly with Luo Xianzi, who was in the 21st place on Heaven and Earth Supreme ranking list. After 1,000 years of cultivation in Emperor's Sword Palace, Jian Wushuang had improved tremendously in sword principle and his overall power. Then he was stronger than he had been 1,000 years ago. But in the end, when he gave full play to his sword principle, close combat skill, and Hongjun golden swords, he still had the lower hand. The boatman in black, who exactly is he? Jian Wushuang muttered. He was sure that the boatman in black wasn't a great emperor, but an emperor god expert. He was definitely not on the heaven and earth supreme ranking list. However, his power among all emperor gods on heaven and earth supreme ranking list should definitely be in the top 3, or even second to underworld god. If the gray fog wasn't dispersed by Jian Wushuang forcefully, the boatman in black would be able to fight with underworld god with the existence of gray fog. He was definitely a terrifying existence. He doesn't exist on heaven and earth supreme ranking list. Could he be from Holocaust Sect of Acheron Palace? Jian Wushuang couldn't help but ask. Holocaust Sect and Acheron Palace were hidden. Their experts almost never revealed themselves. Hence, Sanctuary Alliance didn't know much about the experts that the two dark forces had. If it was said that the boatman in black was from Holocaust Sect of Acheron Palace, it was possible. Then, the boatman in black looked at Jian Wushuang. The infamous Sword Emperor is really not weak. Even I will have to pay a price if I want to kill you. Just as he spoke, the boatman in black suddenly flipped his hand and took out a creepy black pearl. Jian Wushuang's heart skipped a beat at the sight of the black pearl. The boatman in black had already squashed the black pearl. The pearl broke, and dark energy that struck fear even into Jian Wushuang soared up. The dark energy concentrated on the black saber under the control of the boatman in black. Die! The boatman in black took action. He swung out his black saber. Suddenly, the universe was engulfed in boundless darkness. In the dark, a resplendent light shined. The light was too bright. It was definitely one of the brightest lights Jian Wushuang had seen, and its speed was unbelievably fast. The moment it was swung out, it appeared in front of Jian Wushuang. He who wanted to withstand it by performing 8 divine mountain wouldn't have a chance either. Then Jian Wushuang's face grew red, while 4 out of his 14 arms flowed with billowing divine power and wielded the swords. The 4 sword shadows collided with the light. Clang! A terrifying power traveled, and almost instantly, the 4 swords in the 4 arms flew off. But the power of the light didn't decrease and hit Jian Wushuang's body. Poof! Jian Wushuang spat a mouthful of blood, while Jian Wushuang's body retreated tens of thousands of miles away before he regained stability. After Jian Wushuang steadied himself, he suddenly lifted his head. A great emperor's hit. Without a doubt, the power of the light earlier had already surpassed an emperor god's power. It definitely had reached the level of a great emperor. It was equal to a great emperor's hit. Hence, it could throw Jian Wushuang's sword away and continue to injure Jian Wushuang. The boatman in black squinted his eyes. He didn't die. A great emperor's hit was enough to kill an emperor god easily. That was definite. On heaven and earth supreme ranking list, among all emperor gods, only 2 could withstand a great emperor's hit, but not die. But then, Jian Wushuang had done it. It seems like your armor was no ordinary chaotic divine treasure. The boatman in black glanced at the crimson armor on Jian Wushuang. He knew that the reason why Jian Wushuang could withstand the hit was because of the armor. Jian Wushuang himself admitted that. His divine power could be compared to an emperor god's favorably, and in addition to his ancient tribe bloodline, his divine power was impressive. However, to block the earlier hit like a great emperor's hit with his defense body, it was impossible. But he had 5-gem armor. As the only treasure that ancient tribe expert from ancient times, Wu Hun, had left for him, although it was broken, his defense power was still terrifying, like the great emperor hit earlier. Its power was diminished by 90% after 5 gem armor. With only the remaining power left, it naturally couldn't kill him. As a great emperor hit couldn't kill you, it seems that I can't do anything about you. Sword Emperor, you're lucky this time. We shall meet again. Just as he said that, the boatman in black floated to the far-off void. Chapter 1886, 200 years. Jian Wushuang stood in the void as he watched the boatman in black leave. He didn't intend to chase after him. He was clear that, in terms of power, the boatman in black was still above him, and he had many tricks and techniques on hand. It was already great enough that he got to survive the attack. It was an extravagant hope to take down the boatman in black. This person who sent him? Jian Wushuang thought to himself. Speaking of assassination, Jian Wushuang thought of Acheron Palace and Holocaust Sect first. However, his gut feeling told him that the boatman in black should have nothing to do with Acheron Palace and Holocaust Sect. After all, he had experienced the power of the 2 dark forces before. They either don't attack all, or there would be definite death if they did. Just like the besiegement of Acheron Palace last time. If it wasn't because he was lucky and he had met 1-star man, it would have been impossible for him to survive. Then, although the boatman in black was powerful, and he could pull a great emperor-like hit, he couldn't corner Jian Wushuang to a desperate situation with that. Acheron Palace and Holocaust definitely wouldn't only reach such level when they attacked. As he wasn't from the 2 dark forces, those who could send someone so powerful yet with no fame definitely would only be the existence of the high above. The great emperor finally couldn't hold back and started taking action at me. Jian Wushuang looked gloomy. Among the great emperors in Sanctuary Alliance, there were quite a few that didn't wish to see him grow. Merely because there were some great emperors that were looking forward to his growth, they were restricting one another. Although there are quite a few great emperors that don't wish to see me grow, currently, only Abysmal Saint Master displayed his hostility towards me. Unless the one who wanted to kill me this time is really Abysmal Saint Master, Jian Wushuang muttered. Of course, he wasn't sure. Although, I don't know which great emperor did it this time. But luckily, as he still has scruples, he couldn't kill me personally, but only could send the boatman in black earlier. There's a what-if in every situation. ID better be more careful. Otherwise, it might be a great emperor who attacks personally next time. Power. It's power. Jian Wushuang clenched his hands, and he felt unwilling to yield. He knew that he was eyed by some great emperor. He had no other ways. He could only be defensive and take the hits. He could only think of ways to resolve the danger that he was in. It was the difference in power. Not until the day that he obtained the 7th step of inverse cultivation skill and truly became an almighty would he be able to stand side by side with the great emperors. Jian Wushuang didn't stay any longer in the void, but quickly returned to Lineage of Star. In the huge, luxurious estate that looked like a paradise. In the middle of the estate, there was a river, and the river water was as clear as crystal. There was a boat floating, and there was a lazy man in a purple robe fishing with a bamboo pole in the boat. The entire estate was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Suddenly, the boatman in black appeared at the corner of the boat. He greeted politely, "Master, I'm back." "How did it go?" The lazy man asked casually. "I already used Blood Dynasty Pearl, but I still failed in the end. The defensive armor of Jian Wushuang's body is unusual," the boatman in black said. "Oh." The lazy man raised his eyebrows, but he didn't mind much. "Forget it. Let Jian Wushuang live for a while longer. Oh, year, you didn't reveal anything to him, right?" "Master, I was in disguise during the attack." "Besides Master, There is no one else who knows it was me, the boatman in black said, as his appearance and aura changed at a fast speed. The original tan-skinned, scrawny elderly in black suddenly became an extremely evil-looking lady in a purple robe. The lady looked enchantingly beautiful. Her skill was fair, and her body figure was curvy. She was a classically beautiful girl. Even if Jian Wushuang saw this lady, he definitely wouldn't associate her with the boatman in black. Not long after the assassination of the boatman in black, Jian Wushuang returned to Lineage of Star. He cultivated an Emperor's Sword Palace for 1,000 years. In the past 1,000 years, nothing had happened in Eternal Chaotic World. Lineage of Star was rather peaceful. Ever since the fight between Lineage of Star and Abysmal Palace, Lineage of Star had displayed their fierce power, and it served as a deterrent to all forces. Plus, the news about the Master of Star Palace's death had yet to be confirmed. Hence, although the forces and experts had intentions in their heads, no one dared to take action against Lineage of Star at that moment. However, the date of the closing of ancient Mystery Land was getting closer. There were only 200 years left. 200 years were extremely short. The time wasn't much left for Lineage of Star. In the lofty hall, Master Yuan, how did the expert recruitment go? Jian Wushuang asked. As of now, there is a total of 17 Almighties that have accepted our invitation. Among the Almighties, there are 2 Emperor Gods, while the rest of the 15 are Sir Gods. Among the 15 Sir Gods, there is one who is on Heaven and Earth's Supreme ranking list. In addition to Emperor God Zhou-Yin, who accepted our invitation earlier, we now have 5 people with the fighting power of an Emperor God in Lineage of Star. Plus, Palace Master yourself and Jian Yi, there are 2 peak Emperor Gods. Hall Master Yuan sounded excited. Fighting power of 5 Emperor Gods. Among all sects in Sanctuary Alliance, any forces had yet to achieve that. However, Lineage of Star had achieved it. Of course, that was because the condition that Lineage of Star had offered was too tempting. Not only did they give them chaotic divine treasure, but the temptation of secret skill of Star Palace was also huge. These people in Lineage of Star, are they honest people? Jian Wushuang asked. Palace Master, don't worry. First of all, these people have good reputation. Secondly, they have yet to receive a secret skill of Star Palace. Even though they have gotten their chaotic divine treasure, they are still restricted. Unless it comes to the brink of life and death, they won't abandon Lineage of Star and leave, Hall Master Yuan said. That's great. Jian Wushuang nodded faintly. Although the experts had accepted Lineage of Star's invitation, they had come merely for the benefits offered, and they didn't have any relationship with Lineage of Star, let alone a feeling of belonging. It was impossible for them to go all out for Lineage of Star. Hence, Jian Wushuang merely wanted to hang on to them through benefits. Wait until the war exploded. Even if these people didn't risk their all for Lineage of Star, they could at least be useful then. They could definitely increase the overall fighting power of Lineage of Star. Chapter 1887 time limit is up. Oh, yeah. On the way back from Emperor Sword Sect, I met a mysterious expert. Jian Wushuang briefly told him the story about the boatman in black. The boatman in black is extremely scary. He even took out a strange pearl and exploded a hit that wasn't second to a great emperor's hit. Hall Master Yuan, you know more about Sanctuary Alliance than I do. Do you know the origin of the boatman in black? The boatman in black. Hall Master Yuan creased his eyebrows slightly. In Eternal Chaotic World, there are some experts that are powerful but not famous. They have power that isn't second to Emperor God, but they aren't on Heaven and Earth's Supreme ranking list. However, there are not many experts like that, and the boatman in black that Palace Master was talking about, according to what Palace Master said, the Boatman in Black's power should be in the top 10 among all emperor gods in heaven and earth's supreme ranking list. Such expert, there are none according to the people I know. None. Jian Wushuang shook his head, and he was helpless. He could tell that the Boatman in Black was most likely sent over by a great emperor. Which great emperor, to be exact? He had no idea either. Forget it. I shall not think about him for now. As for now, I should be dealing with the upcoming danger that lineage of star is facing. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath. 200 years. Only 200 years left. 200 years later, the storm would come again. In the 200 years, Jian Wushuang never left but cultivated in seclusion on Sword Star. He was naturally cultivating the King Sword principle that he had obtained from Emperor Sword Palace. He had comprehended 3 moves from King Sword principle, and every single move could split the heavens and break earth. What Jian Wushuang needed to do, then, was to master the first move within 200 years. As long as he masters the first move from King Sword principle, it meant that he had another extra killer move. Time flew past. During the 1,000 years when Jian Wushuang had comprehended in Emperor Sword Palace, Eternal Chaotic World had been extremely quiet. Plus, as Jian Wushuang had returned, the forces and experts in Sanctuary Alliance naturally wouldn't dare to incite trouble. In the blink of an eye, 200 years had passed. The ancient mystery land that only opened every 5 million years and only opened for 10,000 years each time. Then, the time limit of 10,000 years was ending. In the huge ancient mystery land, there were a total of 4 entrances, and every entrance was huge. As the time limit of 10,000 years was up, the experts who were wandering in ancient mystery land walked out from the entrance one after another. At one of the entrance, swoosh, swoosh, there were flashes of light. Then there were 2 figures that walked out from the huge wormhole. The 2 people were Sir God Yunsuo and Sir God Li Quan. They were 2 powerful Sir Gods. During these years, the 2 had teamed up to wander in ancient mystery land. After wandering, they had gained a bountiful harvest. After the 2 exited the wormhole, Sir God Yunsuo suddenly paused and looked around in shock. Where are there so many people? Sir God Yunsuo could see a large number of figures gathered around the entrance. The figures were made up of strong and weak people. Plus, within the range of his soul power senses, he could feel many auras hidden in the void nearby. In the past, when ancient mystery land closed, although there were some experts waiting outside, most of them were spies from intelligence organization. The amount was never this high, Sir God Yunsuo exclaimed in surprise. Li Quan, do you know what happened? Sir God Yunsuo looked at Sir God Li Quan by his side. I heard. Sir God Li Quan smiled. I heard that Vientiane Tower sent out a message not too long ago that the Master of Star Palace from lineage of Star had passed away, and he passed away in ancient mystery land. However, the news is only Vientiane Tower's guess. It has yet to be verified. All these years, there were many forces and experts in Sanctuary Alliance that wanted to test lineage of Star's actual situation. Even Abysmal Palace fought with lineage of Star personally. Until now, no one was certain. Now, ancient mystery land is going to close. This is a chance to surely verify if the Master of Star Palace died. Of course, there are many who are here. I see. Sir God Yunsuo was shocked. The scary Master of Star Palace passed away? No one knows if it was true or false, but wait till ancient mystery land is closed entirely and see if the Master of Star Palace walks out of ancient mystery land. Then we will be able to tell. Why not let's wait here too, Sir God Li Quan suggested. Sure. Sir God Yunsuo nodded immediately. At the entrance there were more and more experts gathered, and there were many spies sent by various forces. Not only that particular entrance, but the other 3 entrances also had a large number of spies keeping watch, and they had been doing that for a very long time. Ever since the news of the Master of Star Palace's death, the spies had been keeping watch at the entrances. No matter which exit did Master of Star Palace took, all forces in Sanctuary Alliance would receive the news at the first instant. Until then, they didn't see the Master of Star Palace. The time continued to fly past. It was getting closer to the time where ancient Mystery Land would be closed entirely. There's only 1 hour left. In another hour, ancient Mystery Land will close. The experts who wandered in ancient Mystery Land all these years, those who are alive, has come out from ancient Mystery Land long ago. However, the Master of Star Palace has yet to show himself. It seems that Vientiane Tower's assumption is true. Humph! I could tell long ago that the Master of Star Palace had passed away, but I couldn't be certain about it. But now I am definite. The experts from all forces locked their gazes upon the entrances. The closing time was getting closer, and the Master of Star Palace was nowhere to be seen. The experts were certain 1 hour was ending soon. 10 breaths, only 10 breaths left. The Master of Star Palace is not coming out. It is definite that the Master of Star Palace has died. The experts from all forces were sighing. Very soon, with the experts' countdown, the 10 breaths time ended too. The time limit of 10,000 years was up. Theoretically, as the time was up, the 4 entrances of ancient Mystery Land should close. However, there were no changes to the 4 entrances. The 4 huge wormholes didn't move an inch, and there was no sign of them closing. What happened? The time is up. Why are the 4 entrances not closing? Did we remember wrongly? Is it not time for ancient Mystery Land to close yet? Chapter 1888, Great Shock. Remember the time wrongly? Impossible. It is possible if only the 2 of us remembered wrongly, but it is impossible for all of us to remember wrongly. The 10,000 years time limit is up. There is no doubt about this. But the entrance of ancient Mystery Land didn't close. Let's wait. Maybe it will be closed again. The experts at the 4 entrances were watching closely. 1 hour, 2 hours, 1 day, 2 days. In the blink of an eye, a year had passed. The 4 entrances of ancient Mystery Land were still there. There were no changes at all. There were even some experts who had tried to enter ancient Mystery Land and walked out from ancient Mystery Land again. It was smooth. Then, everyone was dumbfounded. At the same time, the news spread around Sanctuary Alliance and the entire eternal chaotic world. The time limit of 10,000 years had been reached, but ancient Mystery Land hadn't closed. When everyone found out about the news, they were astonished. One should know that ancient mystery world was from ancient times. Since the Second Era until then, ancient Mystery Land had been open countless times over the years. It had already become a pattern that it would open every 5 million years and opens for 10,000 years each time. It had been so for countless times, and there was never once any mistake. But then, it was obviously an unexpected incident. On Thunderbolt Island, on the peak of the Sanctuary Mountain, in a huge courtyard, there was an elderly in gray who was fishing quietly with a bamboo pole and single prank footbridge. Suddenly, a middle-aged man with silver-white hair that barged into the courtyard. Ancestor Tian Chun. Something happened. The man with silver-white hair walked next to the elderly in gray. What happened? The elderly in gray, also the 4th place on Heaven and Earth Supreme ranking list, put down the bamboo pole and looked. I just received news. After ancient Mystery Land opened for 10,000 years, it didn't close, the man with silver-white hair said. What? Ancestor Tian Chen's face changed. No matter if it were Ancestor Tian Chun or East Royal Emperor, They were both the higher-ups in Sanctuary Alliance. Also, they were the peak experts of Eternal Chaotic World. They knew the deepest and greatest secrets of Eternal Chaotic World. Similarly, they also knew what Ancient Mystery Land contained. Ancient Mystery Land had been opening and closing in order, and they didn't care. But then, the other few already knew? Ancestor Tianqin asked. I already sent a message to them. However, you have to inform him, East Royal Emperor said. The he that he was talking about was naturally the widely acknowledged strongest one, Emperor Bai. Emperor Bai was supreme. Even among great emperors in Sanctuary Alliance, there were very few who could find Emperor Bai, just like East Royal Emperor. Although he was a great emperor, his power was considered ordinary among great emperors. He wasn't close to Emperor Bai, so he didn't have any way to inform Emperor Bai. Let me do it, Ancestor Tianqin said. He then immediately took out a token. After a while, Ancestor Tianqin spoke again. I already messaged him. However, he temporarily didn't reply. We can only wait. Then let's wait, East Royal Emperor said helplessly. Not only Ancestor Tianqin and East Royal Emperor. The great emperors in Sanctuary Alliance had found out about what had happened at Ancient Mystery Land one after another. These great emperors were hardly concerned about anything, as they were all high and mighty. But then they were really shocked. Ancient Mystery Land was associated with too many things after all. To forces and experts of Sanctuary Land, it'd be great if Ancient Mystery Land never closed. One should know that there were boundless opportunities in Ancient Mystery Land. Countless experts were dying to wander inside, but unfortunately, it only opened once every 5 million years and only opened for 10,000 years each time. But then, Ancient Mystery Land had opened for 10,000 years but didn't close. Didn't it mean that they could continue to wander inside for the rest of the time? Of course, although the incident that happened in Ancient Mystery Land had stirred a great commotion. There was another thing that caught quite a lot of attention too. The news about the Master of Star Palace's death was finally verified. Although Ancient Mystery Land never closed, the Master of Star Palace had never exited Ancient Mystery Land in the 10,000 years time limit. That was a fact. They lost their biggest fear at the bottom of their hearts. Even though there was Jian Wushuang attending garrison duty personally at Lineage of Star, the forces and experts didn't look at Jian Wushuang as a bigger threat than the Master of Star Palace. In an instant, all forces and experts in Sanctuary Alliance began to stir. Lineage of Star. What should be here is finally here. Jian Wushuang's face was cold. Hall Master Yuan, Hall Master Guexian, and Hall Master Nie Yun were solemn. Palace Master had passed away 3,000 years ago, and Lineage of Star has made the biggest preparation in the past 3,000 years. We also destroyed many enemies. It is considered good. As for what comes next, it will depend on Lineage of Star if we can pass through the danger, Hall Master Yuan said. In actual fact, Hall Master Yuan and the others already felt grateful. They were glad that each force had scruples because of the Master of Star Palace, and it had given them another 3,000 years. The 3,000 years were too important to them. Hall Master Yuan, invite all the guest elders of Lineage of Star here. I think it's time to show our cards now, Jian Wushuang said. Yes, Hall Master Yuan nodded and immediately sent out messages. In a lofty palace, there was a spacious void. In the void, there were a total of over 20 thrones towering. These people were the almighties that Lineage of Star had recruited over the years via the provision of huge benefits. Including Emperor God Join, there were a total of 18. Then, the 18 almighties were talking among themselves. They didn't look too good as they spoke to one another. I never expected that the Master of Star Palace had really passed away. Although we had already guessed so, it is hard to accept the fact. The moment the Master of Star Palace's death is verified, Lineage of Star will definitely be in great trouble. Everyone has to be mentally prepared. The news about the Master of Star Palace's death was widespread, and the Almighties at the spot naturally knew about it as well. Just then, there were four figures that slowly substantiated in the void. Jian Wushuang was the leader of the four. Jian Wushuang sat down on the highest throne directly while Hall Master Yuan and the other two Hall Masters stood by his side. Chapter 1889, Let Imagination Run Wild. Just as they saw the arrival of Jian Wushuang and the others, everyone who was in discussion in the void immediately became quiet. Jian Wushuang sat at the highest place as he glanced at all Almighties in front of him with a sharp gaze. The Almighties, including the three Emperor gods, couldn't help but feel a tinge of fear when their eyes met Jian Wushuang's. Similarly, they had fighting powers of an Emperor god. However, Jian Wushuang had reached the peak of Emperor god, and those who could match evenly were just a handful. The few Emperor gods at the scene were too far apart with Jian Wushuang. Everyone, I think you have received the news. Jian Wushuang's voice was cold. That's right. The Master of Star Palace has passed away, and he passed away 3,000 years ago. After he passed away, I became the newly appointed Palace Master in Lineage of Star. The Almighties were silent, and no one spoke. Actually, everyone should be mentally prepared for this outcome, right? Jian Wushuang looked around. The Almighties were surprised, but no one denied it. The news about the Master of Star Palace's death was a widespread rumor for very long. It was just that it wasn't verified. They naturally knew the news. Hence, before they accepted Lineage of Star's invitation, they were well prepared. Then, the news was verified to be true. Sword Emperor. There was suddenly a thick voice. There was a 3-meter-tall, mountain-like, brawny man that stood up among the crowd. The brawny man was Emperor God Xianwu, who was extremely strong in defense. Sword Emperor, don't worry. As we accepted Lineage of Star's invitation previously, we definitely won't go back on our words. No matter what Lineage of Star has been through, we will definitely be by Lineage of Star's side. I won't say we would risk everything for Lineage of Star, but we would definitely go all out, Emperor God Xianwu said. Yes, we would definitely go all out as a meager contribution for Lineage of Star. The Almighties stood up one after another and expressed their standings. The Almighties that Hall Master Yuan invited had great reputations, and they were men of integrity. Jian Wushuang smiled at the sight. If so, thank you. Everyone, Jian Wushuang smiled. Everyone, don't worry. Lineage of Star is different from before. Even when the Master of Star Palace passed away, Lineage of Star wasn't someone who could threaten as they wish. As long as everyone works together, we should be able to deal with any danger. All right, everyone, let's get prepared. Jian Wushuang waved and beckoned for the Almighties to be dismissed. Just then, hold on a second. There was suddenly a low voice. Jian Wushuang and everyone at the scene looked to the source of the voice subconsciously. There was a man in a black robe that revealed a malicious smile. That's Sir God Beihan. There was no problem with his reputation. However, his character is the worst of all, and he is relatively more selfish. Hall Master Yuan sent a message in silence. Selfish? Jian Wushuang was surprised, but he looked calm on the outside. I wonder how can I help you? Sir God Beihan? Sword Emperor, from what I know, many years ago, the Master of Star Palace once massacred wantonly in eternal chaotic world. Hence, he offended many enemies, including many major forces. Those enemies were mostly killed by Sword Emperor in recent years. But the major forces are still here, Sir God Beihan said. Previously, when the Master of Star Palace was here, He could serve as a deterrent force to all the major forces. But now, the master of Star Palace died, and many of the forces might team up to exterminate Lineage of Star. Although Lineage of Star is powerful, and there's the Sword Emperor attending garrison duty personally, I'm afraid it would be very difficult to withstand so many forces simultaneously. It's very difficult. However, Lineage of Star isn't as simple as it looks. If there were to be a war, we could fight against the forces, Jian Wushuang said calmly. Plus, if we really failed to do so, everyone could leave when it comes to a hopeless situation. We, Lineage of Star, wouldn't stop nor question you. Sir God Beihan, you don't have to be worried. Even so, if Lineage of Star were to really be exterminated, secret skill of Star Palace would definitely be in the hands of the forces. By then, it would be impossible for us to get secret skill of Star Palace from the hands of the forces. In other words, we will fight a tough war alongside Lineage of Star, but we won't get any benefit at all. Sir God Beihan's voice sounded rather evil. The moment he said that, there were many people whose expressions changed. Among the Almighties, there were many who came for the secret skill of Star Palace. Lineage of Star had promised that they could receive the inheritance of secret skill of Star Palace if they were to serve Lineage of Star for 10,000 years. However, just as Sir God Beihan had pointed out, if in the upcoming war, Lineage of Star were to be exterminated, who could they get secret skill of Star Palace from? They fought for Lineage of Star, but wouldn't get anything in the end. That wasn't something they wanted. Sir God Beihan, what are you trying to say? Jian Wushuang glanced at Sir God Beihan. I only want to give Sword Emperor a suggestion, Sir God Beihan said. What suggestion? Jian Wushuang remained composed. Very simple. Before the war, which is now, let us inherit the secret skill of Star Palace. Then, not only will we fight Lineage of Star with our all, most importantly with secret skill of Star Palace, we also could give full play to our trump cards. When we perform our trump cards, we could also increase Lineage of Star's winning chances. Isn't it a perfect plan for both parties? Sir God Beihan said. Hearing what Sir God Beihan had said, the surrounding Almighty's faces changed. There were a few that stole glances at Sir God Beihan. Actually, they had had the same idea as Sir God Beihan, but they didn't dare to bring it up. Jian Wushuang looked indifferent, but his heart grew gloomy. You want to get the inheritance of secret skill of Star Palace now? Sir God Beihan, you thought great, Jian Wushuang sneered. The war has yet to start, and all of you have yet to do anything for Lineage of Star. But you want to receive the rewards and benefits? That's a joke. Forget that it would be a life and death war. Even if it was a simple mission, have you ever seen that one could get all the rewards and benefits for completing a task before completing it? In this world, would there be such an amazing deal? Sir God Beihan, are you sure you're not letting your imagination run wild? Chapter 1890 Give Way. Jian Wushuang's voice was cold. In the end, the entire vast void was like it was frozen. Sir God Beihan suddenly grew awkward. Sword Emperor, I was just suggesting a method satisfactory for both parties. You should also put yourself in my shoes. After all, we do not wish to put in so much effort and get nothing in return. Humph! Everything in this world has risk. You want to receive the secret skill of Star Palace from Lineage of Star, but you do not want to take any risk? If I were to let you inherit the secret skill of Star Palace now, when the war exploded, regardless of the situation of Lineage of Star, it wouldn't be related to you. Would you fight the war for Lineage of Star wholeheartedly? Sir God Beihan, don't treat the others like idiots. I believe that if anyone here was me, none of you would be willing to give the promised benefits to the other party before the war began. Am I right? Jian Wushuang looked around. The surrounding Almighties exchanged a look. Although most of them wanted to receive the inheritance of secret skill of Star Palace, then they knew that what Jian Wushuang said made sense. There was no free lunch in this world. You have to put in effort before you get rewarded. That's a definite. One had yet to put in effort, but wanted to receive a reward. It was really ridiculous. Sword Emperor. There was a figure that stood up. It was Emperor God Zhou-yin, who had been invited by Jian Wushuang personally, and also the first who had opted to join Lineage of Stars campsite. Emperor God Zhou-yin smiled. Everyone, maybe you don't know, but I am a killer. I have been a killer for so many years. Although killers are on the dark side, I also know a simple principle. Work first, get paid later. Killing has a huge risk. If I were to be reckless, I would lose my life. However, there are still many killers that are constantly taking a mission for a targeted reward. Comparatively, I find Lineage of Stars invitation that we accepted not as risky as an ordinary killer mission. After all, when we are at the brink of death, we can leave directly and Lineage of Star won't stop us. As long as we are careful, our lives are insured. As for what Sir God Beihan said, to get an inheritance of secret skill of Star Palace, and only then fight for Lineage of Star, that's a joke. The moment he said that, the surrounding people nodded in agreement. Only Sir God Beihan looked embarrassed. Humph. If I do not get the secret skill of Star Palace first, I won't fight for Lineage of Star, Sir God Beihan said. If so, forgive Lineage of Star for not seeing you off. Go ahead. Jian Wushuang looked cold. Hall Master Yuan, Hall Master Guexian, and Hall Master Nia Yun looked cold too. Lineage of Star wasn't like before anymore. Forget about the experts that they invited. With the Dao soldiers alone, it was a terrifying fighting power. With such fighting power, Sir God Beihan was nothing. He wanted to leave, and Jian Wushuang and his troop wouldn't stop him. Very good. I'd like to see how Lineage Star is going to survive this danger. Humph. Sir God Beihan humphed coldly and left. Jian Wushuang and no one at the scene stopped him. After Sir God Beihan left, everyone, although what Sir God Beihan said was like a wild fantasy, it also reminded me. It wasn't a small war after all. If there was any mistake, Lineage of Star would be doomed forever. You might return empty-handed. So, I have changed my mind now. Jian Wushuang's voice spread. The Almighties immediately looked at Jian Wushuang. Changed his mind? Was Jian Wushuang agreeing to let them get the inheritance of secret skill of Star Palace? Everyone, as you are coming for the secret skill of Star Palace, you definitely have a certain understanding of Lineage of Star. You should know that there are 3 volumes in Secret Skill of Star Palace, and they contain different level of power. Now, although I can't let you inherit the secret skill of Star Palace ahead of time, I can promise those who put in extra effort during the war for Lineage of Star, we will reward each of you according to merit. In accordance with credit, you may inherit the first volume of Secret Skill of Star Palace first. If you put in a great effort, you may inherit the second volume. Then, even if Lineage of Star were to be destroyed in the end, as long as all of you gave your all, you would stand a chance to receive the secret skill of Star Palace during the process, so you won't return empty-handed. What do you think? Jian Wushuang looked around. Hearing what Jian Wushuang had said, the Almighties beamed with joy. Reward according to merit, and receive the inheritance of secret skill of Star Palace during the process of war, compared to the promised 100,000 years of service to get the inheritance. It was way more secure. Sword Emperor, don't worry. No matter what happens next in Lineage of Star, we will go all out. Yes, all out. The Almighties on the spot showed their standing. They looked determined. If they were to be said to be insecure, previously no one thought so after. Everyone was convinced and willing to go to war for Lineage of Star. Let's go down and prepare. Jian Wushuang waved. The Almighties left one after another. In the void, there was only Jian Wushuang, and the other 3 hall masters left. Palace Master, I never expected for you to give way. Hall Master Yuan looked at Jian Wushuang in shock. Actually, you don't have to give way, and these people would still fight for lineage of star. Even so, they have scruples more or less. They might even be insecure. When it comes to crucial times, these scruples and insecurities will affect the entire situation. Plus, Sir God Beihan said something right. If these experts were to get the secret skill of Star Palace, their fighting powers would become stronger. Hence, I will separate the secret skill of Star Palace into 3 volumes to receive the inheritance. If they were to inherit the first volume, they would definitely figure a way to get the second and third volumes. In actual fact, it is great enough to be able to cultivate the secret skill of Star Palace. To cultivate the second volume, it's too difficult. It is impossible to cultivate the third one. Only we know that, and these people don't know. Jian Wushuang smiled. That's true. Hall Master Yuan nodded faintly. Ever since the Master of Star Palace had received the secret skill of Star Palace, only Jian Wushuang and the Master of Star Palace had cultivated the second volume. The others had merely got the first volume cultivated. As for the third volume, there was no one who had cultivated it successfully. Chapter 1891, Purple Moon Lake. Oh yeah, Sir God Beihan. Hall Master Yuan suddenly looked at Jian Wushuang. Palace Master, Sir God Beihan has stayed in Lineage of Star for quite some time. He knew quite a bit about Lineage of Star, especially the experts that we invited to Lineage of Star in recent years. Now that he has left Lineage of Star, if he were to spread the news, it would inevitably put Lineage of Star at a disadvantage. I know, Jian Wushuang nodded faintly. The forces and experts in Sanctuary Alliance knew that Lineage of Star were inviting solo experts to join them in recent years by offering benefits, and they knew that many solo experts had agreed. However, the forces didn't know who those solo experts were and how many there were. That information would put Lineage of Star at an advantage in the upcoming war. It would naturally be best not to announce it to the public. Don't worry about it. Sir God Beihan doesn't stand a chance. When he opted to leave Lineage of Star, I told Jian Yi to follow him. Jian Wushuang said coldly. Jian Yi. Hall Master Yuan was stunned. Jian Yi, a hidden fighting power of Peak Emperor God in Lineage of Star. Jian Wushuang obviously had considered that long ago, so he had sent Jian Yi to take care of it. In Lineage of Star, outside the boundless universe galaxy, Sir God Beihan in a black robe had just walked out from Universe Galaxy. In the void, Sir God Beihan stole a glance at Universe Galaxy behind him, and there was rage in his gaze. Humph, Jian Wushuang, you are not willing to pass me the inheritance of secret skill of Star Palace now, right? Very well. I shall head to the major forces that harbor deep-seated grudges against Lineage of Star now. I'll head to Soaring Heaven King Palace, Divine King Island, Highest Heaven Emperor Mansion. With my power and the information about Lineage of Star that I know, it will be easy to join any of those forces. Plus, the few major forces will definitely take action to exterminate Lineage of Star. Wait until Lineage of Star is exterminated. Then I will receive the inheritance of secret skill of Star Palace as well. Plus, joining these major forces is much steadier than joining Lineage of Star. Sir God Beihan scoffed. From his viewpoint, Lineage of Star lost the Master of Star Palace to be in a commanding position, and all forces would definitely swarm in. Lineage of Star wouldn't be able to withstand it, and they would only be left with one outcome: extermination. Previously, he had agreed with Lineage of Star because he wanted to seize a chance to get secret skill of Star Palace. As for fighting for Lineage of Star, He would contribute, but the moment there was a danger, he would definitely run without hesitation. However, he never expected that he would argue with Jian Wushuang in Lineage of Star before the war had even started. Jian Wushuang, just you wait. It'll make you regret it. Sir God Bei Han's gaze was cold, and he didn't hesitate about Lineage of Star behind him. He immediately moved forward to the vast void. However, he had just left Universe Galaxy and plunged forward in the void for less than 15 minutes when there was an evil-looking figure that blocked his way. Sir God Bei Han's face changed, and his body immediately stopped. "Who are you?" Sir God Bei Han looked solemn as he fixed his eyes upon the evil-looking figure. Although he didn't give out any aura, Sir God Bei Han's gut feeling told him that the person was strong. "You're deaf." Jian Yi didn't talk anymore, but he moved his figure ghostly and came behind Sir God Bei Han. Too fast. It was so fast that Sir God Bei Han didn't manage to react at all. So strong. Sir God Bei Han looked on in disbelief. Jian Yi took action, and his speed itself revealed how scary Jian Yi was. Such terrifying speed. There was almost no one among the experts that he knew that could be compared favorably. His power was far beyond his imagination. Such a scary expert. Why would he appear here and want to kill him? He had never offended any expert like him. "Jian Wushuang, it's Jian Wushuang." Sir God Bei Han stared, and he had already guessed who had sent the scary expert. How is it possible? How did Lineage of Star hide such a scary expert? Sir God Bei Han looked on in disbelief. Jian Yi's hoary hand, with boundless power, grabbed his throat. Sir God Bei Han roared madly from the bottom of his heart, but he couldn't struggle at all. The hoary hand grabbed his throat, and Jian Yi exerted strength in his grip. Then Sir God Bei Han's head cracked, and his vigor was instantly interrupted. He killed Sir God Bei Han directly. Jian Yi took care of Sir God Bei Han's dead body and took his Qian Kuan ring. Then he turned to head back to Lineage of Star. Lineage of Star in a lofty palace. Jian Wushuang didn't wait long until Jian Yi appeared in front of him. "Master, Sir God Bei Han died." Jian Yi looked cold, and there was passion in his eyes when he looked at Jian Wushuang. "Well done." Jian Wushuang nodded his head, and he was satisfied. After Jian Yi had left Green Fire World, his power had already recovered to the level of middle-stage chaotic realm. In recent years, when Jian Wushuang had fought and massacred outside, Jian Yi had never joined. He had been using an enormous amount of resources to recover his power. Then Jian Yi's power had recovered to the peak of middle-stage chaotic realm. He was only one step away from peak chaotic realm. One should know that Jian Yi was an ancient expert. At his strongest, he was at the peak of chaotic realm. The techniques and skills that he had on hand weren't comparable to Emperor gods from the Second Era. His fighting power then was so strong that even Jian Wushuang found it unbelievable. Merely as a conservative assumption, Jian Wushuang reckoned Jian Yi should be able to match evenly with the number one Emperor god in eternal chaotic world, Underworld God. The Master of Star Palace's death is verified. There must be rising winds and scudding clouds in the outside world. At such a crucial moment, there's a person that I have to see, Jian Wushuang said. The other 3 hall masters exchanged a look and nodded. They could guess who Jian Wushuang wanted to see. In Purple Moon Sanctuary, a beautifully enchanting lake. The lake water was purple. At night, the moon reflected on the lake and formed a huge purple moon. Its name, Purple Moon Lake, derived from it. In the middle of Purple Moon Lake, there was a small island. Although the island wasn't huge, everyone knew that the island possessed an absolute ruling power over Purple Moon Lake. As the purple moon hung low, the entire island looked even more captivating. At the border of the island, a red-robed elderly was waiting patiently. The red-robed elderly's aura was strong, and he was a Sir God expert. However, the Sir God had been waiting on the island for 1,800 years, and the master of the island had yet to see him. Chapter 1892. Greetings, Great Emperor. A child at the age of 12 walked out from the island. Don't judge the child by his looks. The aura that he gave out was unfathomable, not much weaker than the red-robed elderly. Sir God Haydan, I asked on your behalf earlier. The master is still not awake. Hence, Sir God Haydan, you have to wait for a little longer, the child replied with his young and immature voice. Don't worry. I'll just wait here. The red-robed elderly, Sir God Haydan smiled, but didn't give himself airs. One should know that he had been waiting for 1,800 years. Sir God, an almighty, an extremely noble position in eternal chaotic world. He had waited for 1,800 years, but the master of the island never once appeared. However, Sir God Haydan didn't dare to feel upset because he knew clearly the true identity of the master of the island. Forget about 1,800 years. Even if it was 18,000 years, he had to wait patiently. Just then, swoosh, a figure plunged over from afar and landed on the island. Then, it appeared next to Sir God Haydan. Please help me inform your master that Jian Wushuang from Lineage of Star would like to see him. Jian Wushuang looked at the child and said humbly, Jian Wushuang? Sword Emperor? The child revealed a surprised look. As for Sir God Haydan, his body quivered in shock too. Sword Emperor's name was well known in eternal chaotic world. His name had long resounded in the expert's ear. The child and Sir God Haydan naturally knew. Sword Emperor, please wait for a moment. I shall go in and report immediately. The child bowed slightly at Jian Wushuang, then he turned and walked into the island. Jian Wushuang wasn't in a hurry, but waited there. After a while, the child walked out and stopped before Jian Wushuang. Sword Emperor, Master has awakened. He asked for you to come in, the child said. Thank you. Jian Wushuang thanked him and walked to the island immediately. Then how about me? Sir God, Haydan asked by the side. Sir God, Haydan, Master didn't say that he is going to see you. So, I will have to keep you waiting for a little while longer. Who knows? Master might summon you in after he sees Sword Emperor, the child replied. I understand. Sir God Haydan smiled bitterly. He had come first, and he waited for 1,800 years. However, the master of the island woke up and called Jian Wushuang. First, of course, he didn't dare to be upset about it. He knew that if Jian Wushuang hadn't come, the master of the island might still be asleep. On the island, the plants grew luxuriantly. Right in the middle of the island, there was a simple thatched cottage. The cottage looked ragged, and as though it was going to collapse if there was rain or wind. Sword Emperor, the master is waiting for you in the cottage. A hunchbacked elder who stood in front of the cottage guided Jian Wushuang in. When Jian Wushuang saw the hunchbacked elder, his eyes dilated in shock. He could tell with a glance that the hunchbacked elder was an emperor god, and he was an extremely strong peak emperor god. However, on the Heaven and Earth Supreme ranking list, there wasn't any introduction about the hunchbacked elder. Not all the top experts in Eternal Chaotic are listed on Heaven and Earth Supreme ranking list, Jian Wushuang muttered. Very soon, he stepped foot into the cottage. In the cottage, there was only a simple bed, a wooden desk, and a wooden chair. On the wooden bed, there was an evil-looking, purple-haired young man. The evil-looking young man looked cold, and he smiled faintly. His smile was so enchanting, looking at the person before him. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and bowed politely as he greeted, Jian Wushuang greets Great Emperor. Great Emperor. That's right. The master of the island was seated on the wooden bed. He was also the ruler of Purple Moon Sanctuary, Purple Moon Emperor. Get up, Purple Moon Emperor waved, and Jian Wushuang immediately stood up. I heard long ago that there was an unprecedented top genius in lineage of star. I finally get to see with my own eyes. Purple Moon Emperor smiled. He looked friendly. Jian Wushuang, you came here today. It should be for lineage of star, right? Yes, Jian Wushuang nodded. The master of Star Palace has passed away, and lineage of star has lost its mainstay. Lineage of star will definitely become a public enemy. All forces, including many experts, will come by with the current lineage of star. I reckon it might be difficult to withstand, Purple Moon Emperor said casually. That's why I came here to ask for help from Purple Moon Emperor, Jian Wushuang said. Help? Purple Moon Emperor smiled faintly. Jian Wushuang, you thought too highly of me. Sanctuary Alliance has its rules. The battle between the forces. As long as they do not take the initiative to provoke it, we great emperors can't get involved as we wish. Lineage of Star has been in Purple Moon Sanctuary for so many years, and we do share some relationships. Even when the Master of Star Palace was alive, he gave me many benefits. Theoretically, I should be protecting lineage of Star. But it's not that I don't want to, but that I can't. Jian Wushuang was surprised. He knew that the great emperors wouldn't get involved in the fights among various forces. At most, they would protect one of the forces due to their relationships. Just like back then on Colored Glaze Sanctuary, Jian Wushuang had cornered Soaring Heaven King Palace into a miserable situation. Soaring Heaven King Palace had no choice but to ask Colored Glaze Emperor to get involved. Although Colored Glaze Emperor didn't get involved in their fights, she came out to protect Soaring Heaven King Palace. Hence, Jian Wushuang couldn't take any action against Soaring Heaven King Palace in Colored Glaze Sanctuary. However, besides Colored Glaze Sanctuary, Colored Glaze Emperor didn't care about anywhere else. That was the protection given by Colored Glaze Emperor. Lineage of Star was under the command of Purple Moon Sanctuary. Lineage of Star had been in touch with Purple Moon Emperor, and they have given Purple Moon Emperor many advantages. Lineage of Star even gave Purple Moon Emperor a white blaze fruit tree. Theoretically, Purple Moon Emperor really should provide protection to Lineage of Star. Once Purple Moon Emperor provided protection, the forces and experts who had bad intentions towards Lineage of Star naturally wouldn't dare to act hastily. But obviously, it's because of secret skill of Star Palace? Jian Wushuang asked. The secret skill of Star Palace is secondary. You are the main concern. Purple Moon Emperor glanced at Jian Wushuang. You have great potential among the higher-ups in Sanctuary Alliance. Although there are many who are looking forward to your growth, there are also some who are not willing to see you grow. You should understand the theory behind this. Jian Wushuang's expression didn't change. He naturally understood that. The restrictions that the two camps set for one another formed a balance. At such a moment, if I were to stand out and take Lineage of Star under my wing, the balance would tremble. By then, Lineage of Star would be in greater danger, Purple Moon Emperor said. As such, Lineage of Star's danger, I can't get involved personally. However, due to past relationships, Elder Qian,